Welcome to Anti-Crusade, Part 3 of 4. From the way I'm putting this third video together, it looks like I've improved compared to the first two videos. I was afraid it was going to be the way, but it does look that way. It looks like Part 1 of 4 was the chaotic one, and Part 2 of 4 was a bit disruptive with an attempt at self-discipline. This Part 3 is a bit more disciplined. I really hope Part 4 of 4 will be at least as close to perfection as possible. And I'm going to clarify here right now that, while I did say this before, I'm going to say this again. The Bundist Movement channel is no longer the property of Donna Newman. She basically, she had promised she'd be more frequent on it. Now, if you go through some of the videos on this channel, you can hear her voice, and so she has been involved. But she was the primary editor. As far as I can remember, only 2 videos on this channel back when this was her channel were done by me exclusively, and that these were more easier videos to make in that way because you just put the videos together. Sometimes there's things requiring editing. I'm not allowed. The editor wishes to remain anonymous for this 4-part series, and I'm very thankful to the editor who helped me with this. I do not believe that these videos are perfect, but it's better that I make some mistakes in this 4-part series rather than the 3-part series on national cultural autonomy, which I want to look really good. In this series, I make several attempts to explain what it is, the actual demarcus position on why secularism is considered the same thing as capitalism, and how that doesn't mean the same thing as secular. Secular and secularism are not the same thing. Anytime you hear the word ism, it does imply something ideological. This is also the video where I explain why I have problems with John Lennon. And it's not just me. I've never actually spoken for myself. I am a facilitator. Dr. Weisfeld is also a facilitator, and he contributes. Same with me. I'm a facilitator and I contribute. The same is true of Donna Newman, but Donna Newman has issues. And I'm not trying to make this about Donna Newman, but there's a lot of people, primarily demarkists, that I have to answer to. It is unprincipled to make a promise and then not follow through. So I'm sorry that I've been late with a lot of things. Part of the issue is that, as I had said before, there will be an actual self-criticism video, which will criticize myself, Dr. Weisfeld, and Donna Newman. But I've had to... that is a script in the making, by the way. And I've already debriefed Dr. Weisfeld on what I would criticize him on. It's narrowed down to 2 things. And then after both criticisms comes 2 affirmations. And if people don't like that, tough fucking shit. Because... you see, most of what people wanted criticized, Dr. Weisfeld has corrected. And I guess that's where I get to gloat on some of the communists. And these are not anti-communist videos, but, like, communists assume too much. Typically. I had said to many communists, both online and in the real world, I had said that... it may take a while. Dr. Weisfeld is stubborn, but if something is actually correct, he will adapt his positions to the more correct position. He's done that and then some as of recently. So I'm gloating on the communists. You guys don't understand. Bundists, we are better than you communists. And I'm not saying that to have a superiority complex. I'm saying that you guys don't self-criticize. You claim to self-criticize, but you don't. Now, there are phenomenal exceptions to this. Most of those exceptions are Maoists. No surprise. The high exception to this are the Maoist Third Worldists, which are the most hated communists in the world. And I'm afraid that Third Worldism won't survive the winter. But I appreciate the multiple front, multiple tendency position that Third Worldists have. This, unfortunately, has led people to believe that Third Worldists, accept all tendencies, and that's not true. They have very strict principles, and those principles come from Maoism. Anyway... this is Anti-Crusade, Part 3 of 4. And To anybody that I've offended in this video, that was not my intention. And I'm not saying that I've offended anybody. It's just I struggle to express things. And sometimes my language, and this has been pointed out to me not only by my wife, but by several people, my language and my borderline hyperbole tends to offend people. And I am working on that. I hope that, with the quality people have seen in these videos, that there has been a better change. I know that they're not up to par to the where they should be. I don't think that this series is exactly going to be up to par to the way it should be, but it's getting closer. And, I have to find that balance between impersonal and personal. One of the things common among demarchists is that we do speak in the I and we're very personal, and sometimes it can be confusing as to when we're speaking for the collective and when we're speaking for ourselves. I try to fix that in this series particularly, but the topics at hand are happening right now. I'm very enraged and angry. I am scared and terrified that the state of Israel exists and that the state of Israel continues to do all these terrible things in our name. I am angry, and my response to fear is not typical. I've noticed most people run away when they're scared. When I'm scared, I try to do something typically. I hope everybody enjoys this presentation. You will find that this one is more disciplined than the previous two, although I quite have not hit it, so I hope that part 4 of 4 will be better. This is Anti-Crusade, part 3 of 4. I'm going to bring you now to a video from Al Jazeera, which came out on November 20th, 2023.
Hamas's political leader says they are close to reaching a truce agreement with Israel. In a statement, Ismail Haniyeh says Hamas has delivered its response to the potential deal to Qatari negotiators. Qatar has been mediating the release of captives held by its armed wing in Gaza. Let's take a look at the number of captives Israel says were taken by Hamas fighters. Israel says at least 237 people were taken during the October 7th attack by Hamas. They include nationals from more than 40 countries and at least 20 Thai farm workers. The Israeli government says 33 of them are children. Hamas has released 4 of them. An Israeli army says 1 was released during an operation in Gaza. Israel says the bodies of 2 female captives were recovered near the Al-Shifa hospital complex. Well, earlier, US President Joe Biden said he believes the deal to release captives held by Hamas is close. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett has more from Washington, D.C.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday confirming that a deal to secure the release of captives is close. This after days of speculation that an agreement had been reached, but National Security spokesperson John Kirby confirming that the details are still being worked out. What we know is that this agreement could involve a pause in fighting for several days in order to secure the release of dozens of captives. It would also allow for stepped up and much needed humanitarian aid.
If you're going to secure the release of hostages, and we certainly hope we're going to be able to do that soon, you got to make sure they can get from where they are to safety and do that as safely as possible, which means you're going to have at least a temporary localized stop in the fighting to allow them to move. I mean, we also can't take for granted that all these people are easily mobile and don't have some sort of health issues that require perhaps a slower route out or assistance getting out. So I don't want to negotiate in public, but we believe we're getting closer.
John Kirby also confirming to Al Jazeera for the second time in roughly a week, senior White House advisor Amos Hochstein is in Israel meeting with senior officials, specifically the National Security Advisor as well as the defense minister. The goal of the meetings is to try and prevent a broader war between Israel and Lebanon, the concern that there could be the risk of a second northern front. There will also be meetings with Lebanese officials as well. The fear is that Israel, because of its military activity inside Lebanon, may be trying to provoke Hezbollah into a wider conflict that could potentially even draw in the United States. As a result, the goal of these meetings, again, to try and send a strong message of deterrence. Kimberly Helkett, Al Jazeera, the White House.
Well, for more on this, let's speak to Sarah Hyrat. She joins us live from occupied East Jerusalem. So, Sarah, it does appear that a deal is growing ever closer. What are you hearing from the Israeli side?
Good morning, Laura. Well, it seems that everything is indicating, and all the players that are involved are indicating that this is imminent and it's due to happen. However, despite Israeli media reporting that Israel has given the green light to go ahead with this potential deal, you have Hamas seemingly saying that it potentially might happen in a few hours, whereas the Israeli media is reporting that it could be potentially happening in a few days. So maybe the timing is slightly different as far as we know. However, still no details revealed whatsoever. What we do know is that the families of those held captive in a huge meeting with the war cabinet overnight discussed potentially some of that information that hasn't been privy to the public just yet. It was behind closed doors at the Foreign Ministry in Tel Aviv, and they came out because they had been demanding answers from their government as to what the latest situation is in terms of the negotiations that have been happening via the US, Qatar and Egypt. They came out saying that they couldn't share that information with the media. They didn't seem to be happy with the results, emphasizing that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had been focusing mostly on the fact that carrying out this war against Hamas and eliminating Hamas was equally as important as bringing back those captives. However, the families have been saying time and time again and protesting. We've seen protests, we've seen marches with them saying that bringing back the captives alive should be absolutely paramount. In terms of the details, it's still not 100% clear just yet because nothing has been shared, but there have been talks of a possible 5-day pause and potentially the release of, well, we've seen different reports, about 50, they've said, women and children, Israeli captives, women and children, and in exchange for the release of Palestinian women and children held in detention by Israel. But there are also talks that potentially it could be all of the women and children captives. So those details are probably is what has taken so long in the last few days to iron out. But it seems that a deal is potentially imminent very soon.
OK, and we'll certainly keep an eye on announcements about a deal and, of course, the details as they get, as they get announced. There has been huge pressure, hasn't there, on Benjamin Netanyahu and the war cabinet to secure the release of these hostages.
Yeah, that's right, Laura. As I was just saying there, that meeting that happened overnight, initially what we saw was these families that had demanded a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and in the entire war cabinet. They didn't want to just meet one individual or two. They wanted their entirety to be there. And this came off the back of a march that had thousands of Israelis marching with families of captives all the way from Tel Aviv earlier this week to Jerusalem, which took them an incredible 5 days. Many of them said they weren't just physically fatigued, but of course emotionally fatigued as well. Many of them had family members killed on October 7, and then also those that are held captive. So they've been pushing for answers to their questions. They said they don't know if the government even is aware of the whereabouts of those captives that are being held and what the condition is. Another demand they've been making recently is asking for medical staff from the WHO, from the World Health Organization, along with several other entities like the Red Cross in Gaza, to be able to find out if it's possible to check on them, because a lot of those held captive are without medication, especially those where it's essential to their survival. The biggest fear for them has been from day one is that their relatives are killed in airstrikes. And for them, they said that if it's up to them, they would accept any form of deal as long as it means that it brings all of them, and they want all of them back at the same time.
Sarah Hyrat joining us there with the latest from occupied East Jerusalem. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Very interesting indeed. Next up, we have a Democracy Now! Video, which came out on November 30th, 2023.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermin Sheikh.
As we continue our coverage of Gaza, we're joined by Raji Sourani, the award-winning human rights lawyer and director of the Gaza-based Palestinian Center for Human Rights. He's a recipient of the Right Livelihood Award and the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award. We last spoke with Raji Sourani after Israel bombed his home in Gaza City. He joins us today from Cairo, Egypt. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Raji Sourani. If you could begin by talking about how you managed to leave Gaza and how you got to Cairo.
Well, it was very hard and very heartbreaking for me. I mean, to leave Gaza. I mean, the place I lived all my life, one-way ticket in it, and that was very hard and very tough. But really, I mean, after I was targeted for the second time, after we talked, I was advised very strongly, I mean, not to be at that place and to leave, I mean, the northern of Gaza. And I lived with my family who didn't want to leave me alone, I mean, there. So we left together to the south for a few days, and thanks for the help of great friends, I mean, who managed to get me there, because in two previous attempts, it was mission impossible when tens of people died either on the beach road or at Salah ad-Din Street in front of our eyes when the Israelis shot and bombed. I mean, people who were advised to leave to the safe haven in the south, but that wasn't, I mean, the case. So I managed, I mean, to leave to the south finally in my third attempt, and from there I managed to move to Egypt. There was, I mean, quite a lot of friends who wanted, in a way, the voice, I mean, of Gaza, the voice of the voiceless, about the horrendous genocide taking place at that of the board to be reported, I mean, to the outside world. And there is quite a lot of things, I mean, to do with the ICC, which greatly disappointing us, and there is quite a lot of work to do with the ICJ, and there is quite a lot of work to speak to power in European countries about this new Nakba, which is in a process, and Israel creating it, and to stop their complicity, their absolute political, legal, military support for belligerent criminal occupation who's doing suicide, genocide at the daylight, who's doing ethnic cleansing, war crimes, broadcasted there at live at the real time. But it seems deep in their mind and hearts, the colonial, racist Western governments don't want to see, don't want to know, and they are insisting, I mean, in supporting blindly the Israeli belligerent occupation and the crimes they are doing in Gaza and the occupied territories at large.
Raji, if you could look straight into the camera lens as we speak to you now in Cairo, thank God you're okay. When we were speaking to you the day after your house was bombed, you described your son moving you and your beloved wife from one room, saying, let's go into the hallway, and then the place was destroyed. If you could say in more detail what it was like to make your way north to south, what you saw along the way. We also had reports that those who wanted to return to their homes north, so much of the bombing, it may surprise people, is happening actually in the south, where people are directed to go before the ceasefire. Is it true that people were shot trying to go home in the north? The Israeli military had said, don't do this.
Well, we have to understand the context the context of what the Israeli really want. In simple words, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the criminal Netanyahu, said in simple words, Gazans should leave Gaza. He said Gaza should be deserted. And the Minister of Defense, Gallant, in a clear, simple way, he said, for Gazans, there will be no food, no electricity, no fuel, but so what does that mean? I mean, if you say Gazan should leave Gaza, to go where to? It's obvious and clear. If you are starving and cutting electricity, food, medicine, you are bombing shelters, hospitals, ambulances. If you are killing hundreds of entire families, I mean, being erased, if you are bombing bakeries, if you are bombing water infrastructure and desalination plants, if you are bluffing, I mean, the entire streets in the Gaza, if you are not allowing people even to reach hospital, if you bomb the civil defense system and the people who are working on it, what do you want from that? If you make no safe haven in entire Gaza, what's the purpose of that? They want to push the north to the south. This is the first stage, and they pushed many as million people, I mean, to the south. Gaza already one of the most dense populated area on earth, and they pushed them while Gaza suffered 17 years of blockade, suffocated the life socially, economically, passed through 5 wars against them, and in the eye of the storm, the civilian targets. And now you are doing all that. You are killing almost 30,000 people, because many, I mean, still, I mean, under the rebels, many still under their destroyed houses, and civil defense unable to recover. You are talking about thousands of people. You are talking about thousands of people in the streets. In some areas, nobody can get to. The rationale, the behavior of the Israeli guidelines, the outcome of this, pushing people to the south, and then from the south towards Sinai. That's a new Nakba, as simple as that. They want us out of Palestine, out of Gaza, out of the West Bank. But this is, I mean, the ultimate goal, I mean, for the Israeli government, and this coalition of Netanyahu and the right wing, the basis of their governmental agreement, the coalition agreement, to do that. This was said at day one of this war, of this genocide war. And I think yet the Israelis so determined, so willing, and they want to do that. They want to do that. They finished, I mean, the first stage, and now they want to go to the second stage. And after they finish up with Gaza, it won't be a new brand of apartheid in East Jerusalem and West Bank. They will do the same, I mean, there. So what was lack of their plan in 1948 in the Nakba, they want to implement it completely now. So Eretz Israel would be clean, and they will have the purity of the Jewish state. And by that, they will accomplish, I mean, their mission. This is simple, clear, for any who want to see beyond the details, this is really what Israel wants to do. And that's why we call it from the second day. This is genocide, this is ethnic cleansing, and these are first-class war crimes. It's against ABC of international law, international humanitarian law, and it's against Geneva Convention, it's against Rome Statute, and we see from the wall to wall support by many European countries doing that willingly and giving full legal, political, and military support for the state of Israel
Raji,
plus US.
as you talk about international law, can you make that comparison between what happened in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine immediately, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court opening an investigation, especially against children. I think there was something against what happened to the children. 500 children have died in Ukraine over almost 2 years, up to 1,000 dead or maimed. And you compare it to the few weeks of the bombardment of Gaza, 5,000 to 6,000 children alone dead, over 15,000 people dead. What do you want Karim Khan to do? And finally, and we just have a few minutes, right now Blinken just met with Mahmoud Abbas. He just met with just met with Herzog on his fourth trip to the Middle East. The U.S. pushing hard to give more weapons aid to Israel. Your response to that? What do you want Biden to say to Netanyahu? And how much power does he have?
I don't think yet there is decision by U.S. to stop what is going on. They can simply stop all these crimes. We are bombed with F-35, F-16s, the American tanks, the American artillery, the American ammunition. We are killed with that, with some small amount of European arms. Now, if U.S. want to stop that, they can do that. And they can do that simply, but they are supporting, really what Israel is doing.
Raji Sourani is the world-renowned, award-winning human rights attorney, won the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Award, won the Right Livelihood Award, has lived in Gaza for decades. Speaking to us from Cairo, Egypt. He just got out of Gaza. His home was bombed with his wife and his son and him in it. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Now I'm going to direct you to an older video from TRT World. This video came out on May 14th, 2021, and it is provided for educational purposes. Please pay very close attention.
Palestinian lives are being destroyed. Men, women, and children are getting shot, beaten, run over, bombed, and killed. Islam's third holiest site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, has been raided, desecrated, and its worshippers targeted. The story today is about the root of this issue, Zionism, a racist political ideology that gave birth to the State of Israel by legitimizing a settler colonial project in Palestine. This theory has turned into practice, and as the Zionist settler colonial project continues to expand beyond repair in the West Bank and Jerusalem, 70 years of occupation and coercive strategies on the ground, veiled by an irrational legal framework, have created a modern state of apartheid and human indignity spilling over onto your feet.
They all seem so worried about the Palestinians. There's nothing to worry about. It's terrible. Do you like the racism?
I like racism?
Yeah. What do you think about the Palestinians not being able to walk along here?
I don't really think much about it.
It's because you don't think about other people? Or?
Of course I do.
And then how can you not think when they can't walk here and they can't get the bus?
So let's start one by one. Zionism is a political and national movement aimed at creating and sustaining a Jewish state on Arab-Palestinian land in the Middle East. It was founded in 1897 by Theodor Herzl, who created the World Zionist Organization, and is mentioned by name in Israel's Declaration of Independence. Now, before we start going in on Zionism and someone lies to you and tells you that I'm anti-Semitic, it's actually forbidden by God in the Jewish religion for Jews to establish a state until the arrival of the Messiah. Theodor Herzl was not the Messiah, but he went along and advocated for a Jewish state in Palestine anyway. Now, as we live in a world where a critique of Zionism is often equated with anti-Semitism, it is important to clarify the racist, supremacist, and colonial settler references that exist in Zionist thinking. After all, it was Herzl himself who wrote, quote, "The anti-Semites will become our most loyal friends. The anti-Semite nations will become our allies," just to clarify the relationship between anti-Semitism and Zionism. And here are the references, guys. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, said, quote,
"If we want Hebrew redemption 100%, then we must have 100% Hebrew settlement, 100% Hebrew farm, and 100% Hebrew port."
Doesn't seem like this was destined for peaceful coexistence, eh? And this is what he thought of North African Arab Jews, by the way.
Even the immigrant of North Africa, who looks like a savage, who has never read a book in his life, not even a religious one, and doesn't even know how to say his prayers either wittingly or unwittingly, has behind him a spiritual heritage of thousands of years.
MashaAllah, savage, never read a book in his life. But hey, at least Mandem got heritage. On a serious note, the statement reveals how racial supremacy in Zionism is not exclusive to Christians, Muslims, and Arabs, but also to Oriental Jews, who are Arabs in culture, language, and descent. Racial supremacy was a repetitive issue in Ben-Gurion's Zionist ways. For instance, he explained how Jewish laborers should earn a higher salary because, quote, "they were more intelligent and diligent than the Arab." These guys must have been taught biology all wrong, fam. And this idea was central to the Zionist ideology of Avodah Ivrit, which promoted exclusive Jewish labor in Jewish businesses. And the issue, well, most of these ideas have been used as a foundation for the establishment of Israel as a Jewish state. Now that we talked racism, let's move on to settler colonialism. Actually, there's more racism coming. If you don't know what settler colonialism is, it's a continuous process of land annexation whereby native inhabitants are removed and settlers from elsewhere are brought to occupy the land. On your phones, it looks like this.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem?
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
Or even like this. And here I think a perfect example is the work of Zionist thinker and poster boy Vladimir Jabotinsky, who wrote The Iron Wall. No, seriously, that's what it was called. I know what you're thinking. We'll get to that later. Jabotinsky advocated that Israel should literally be built under the guise of an iron wall defense. He made parallels to the European conquest of North America and their genocide of the indigenous populations, and how Zionists must do the same to the Palestinians without the expectation of ever reaching peace or some sort of agreement.
There can be no voluntary agreement between ourselves and the Palestine Arabs, not now nor in the prospective future. Colonization can have only one aim, and Palestine Arabs cannot accept this aim. It lies in the very nature of things, and in this particular regard, nature cannot be changed.
Like his other Zionist comrades, he was very clear about this feeling of superiority, but warned that Palestinians would resist and advocated for using any coercive tactics necessary, including force, manipulation, and deceit to achieve the objectives of Zionism.
Culturally, they are 500 years behind us. They have neither our endurance nor our determination. We may tell them whatever we like about the innocence of our aims, watering them down and sweetening them with honeyed words to make them palatable, but they know what we want, as well as we know what they do not want.
Jabotinsky's Iron Wall went from pen and paper to this. And subhanAllah, just like that, Israel today boasts a big iron wall, keeping the apartheid intact. I mean the Zionism intact. But you see what I'm saying about the connection of the ideology to what's happening on the ground now? Hopefully the connection is clear. To end this chapter on Zionism, I want to cite a powerful quote that I came across from another prominent Zionist thinker, Ahad Ahaim.
He wrote in 1891 a pamphlet dubbed Truth from Palestine. The Jewish settlers treat the Arabs with hostility and cruelty, trespass unjustly, beat them shamelessly for no sufficient reason, and even take pride in doing so.
100 years later, listen to the quote again. Look at this footage and tell me what has changed. And now let's talk about Palestine today. Israel's forceful evictions in the Arab-Palestinian neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, the storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, illegal settlers attacking and killing Palestinians, bombing and laying siege to Gaza, it is all done in the name of Zionism, preserving the hegemony of an exclusively Jewish state and expanding its settler colonial project across the lands. And the worst thing about it is, it's all done in some irrational legal framework. For instance, if we take Jerusalem as an example, we find that if you're a Palestinian living in occupied East Jerusalem, you're subject to 3 legal criteria which can be used to revoke your residency. The first one is Palestinians should not live more than 7 years abroad and must not receive permanent residency or citizenship from another country. Secondly, Palestinians need to prove their center of life is in Jerusalem. And third, Palestinians should not be accused of breaching allegiance to Israel and occupying force. And so even if you don't leave, Israel has made it so that whether you like it or not, they can find a way to displace you. And they have indeed revoked the residencies of more than 14,500 Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem from 1967, and continue to strive for an absolute Jewish majority in the Holy City. This is not to mention the hundreds of thousands that were displaced since 1948 and the millions of Palestinian refugees who were stripped of their legitimate right to return to their ancestral homelands. And it's not surprising, because if the theories that founded the nation were racist and clear about an ever-expanding settler colonial project, why would we expect this to stop? Or not accept that what used to be a footnote in our vocabulary, which is illegal settlements, were and still are an indispensable part of Israel's very existence? And so, I honestly have a few questions to ask before we blame Zionism for everything. If you're a Muslim Arab leader, what have you done to alleviate the suffering of your Palestinian brethren? Do you accept the idea that Arabs and Muslims are backward savages unable to resist their own plight? Have you succumbed to the idea that Zionists are superior? Is there nothing more to do when Islam's third holiest site is being ransacked? Is the will of your people not enough for you to act? And if you are not Muslim or Arab, do you see any sign of humanity in the treatment of Palestinians that you see on your screens? Anything to be neutral about or unmoved by? What would you do if someone kicked you out of your house and drove over your family and shot your mother and told you that it's all fine because you're a stateless and uncivilized? In 2021, as a global community, can we truly accept this and suffice ourselves with a few tweets? Have dignity and freedom lost all their meaning? Or do some deserve it more than others? As for the Zionists who celebrate fires, call attacks clashes, and bombings of children retaliation, I will leave you with a quote from Ahad Haim.
We are used to thinking of the Arabs as primitive men of the desert, as a donkey-like nation that neither sees nor understands what is going around it. But this is a great error. The Arab, like all sons of Sham, has a sharp and crafty mind. Should time come when the life of our people in Palestine imposes to a smaller or greater extent on the natives, they will not easily step aside.
Now I'm going to direct you to a Al Jazeera video, which came out on November 21st, 2023.
At least 8 people have been killed in cross-border shelling in southern Lebanon by the Israeli military. 3 journalists and an 80-year-old woman are among the dead from the targeted attack on the town of Tir Hafa. The El Mayadeen channel in Beirut has confirmed that its correspondent, Farah Omar, is among the dead. It says a photographer and a local journalist were also killed in the attack. Well, let's speak to Zaina Khoda, who's in Nakora in southern Lebanon for us. And Zaina, can you just give us a bit more detail about the latest set of clashes along the border there? And are journalists being deliberately targeted?
Well, this is the 3rd time journalists have been targeted in southern Lebanon since the conflict began 7 weeks ago. Mayadeen lost 3 journalists today on October the 13th. Reuters lost the journalist Taisam Abdallah. Their position came under fire. A few days ago, journalists who were along the border close to the village of Yarin, they too came under fire. So there appears to be a pattern, and journalists are becoming increasingly concerned that the Israeli army wants to silence them. In fact, according to the pan-Arab channel Mayadeen, the channel that the 3 journalists worked for, they are calling this a deliberate strike, and they are saying that the aim of this is to silence the media, quote, so that it will no longer cover Israel's brutality, not only in Lebanon, but in the West Bank and Gaza. But the channel went on to say that it will not be silenced. Lebanese officials have condemned what they're calling an aggression. They've told the Lebanese army to launch an investigation. Reporters Without Borders investigated the attack on October the 13th, and it found that the journalists were not collateral damage in the shooting and that they were deliberately targeted. So it's becoming very difficult for journalists to operate along the border. I can tell you, even wearing our gear with our camera, it's just not enough to keep you safe. And there are many roads, empty villages. You drive through them. On the back of your mind, you think that you're going to be targeted by an Israeli drone. So journalists really are not protected.
Okay, thank you so much, Zaina. There's Zaina Khoda for us in southern Lebanon. Daoud Kutab is a columnist at Al Monitor and a former board member of the International Press Institute. He says there is a concerted effort by Israel to target journalists and that global media networks need to reaffirm that journalism is not a crime.
Lebanon is not the only place. We saw Shireen Abu Akleh, American Palestinian, was killed without anybody being held accountable. We've had 50 journalists in Gaza and media workers killed, 60 media outlets that were destroyed in Gaza. No one is holding Israel accountable, and unfortunately, the people that are victims are the ones who are supposed to be telling us what's happening. Israel thinks that by killing journalists, they can keep information away. In today's modern age, anybody with a phone can tell us what's happening. But they're taking away the professional journalists whose job it is to tell us what is happening on the battlefield. And it's really it's a crime, and it's really a shame that a country that claims to be some kind of a democracy is killing journalists, killing civilians, and getting away with it. The International Press Institute, which I'm a member of, and I was a member of the board, is committed to protect journalists, the Reporters Without Borders, all issue statements, but Israel doesn't seem to care. It's really amazing that our fellow journalists in major media outlets are also not giving enough attention to what is happening to members of their own media outlet, and their own colleagues in the profession. So we need the institutes to speak, but we also need the major journalists from major outlets, CNN, ABC, CBS, all of them should follow the suit of these institutes and say, don't touch journalists. Journalism is not a crime. The crime is killing the journalists, and Israel is committing this war crime and must be told to stop.
Now I'm going to give you Neturei Karta International. I'm going to double down on a position that we hold. Neturei Karta, they are the leaders of our generation. If you're looking for a Jewish position that still has the Mizorah, the only people that could actually be qualified to be identified as the leaders of our generation having the Mizorah is Neturei Karta International. Ahead of time, I will warn people that I'm going to be a bit like this. This series is already a bit opinionated, and I am sorry for that. I'm really just trying to find where I am in this, because like I can't withhold my stronger opinions anymore. I can't take it anymore. But at the same time, I'm trying to do it with a bit more reciprocity. I believe in dialectical reciprocity, but it's something that I don't always know how to follow in high tense situations. And what's happening to Gaza is a very high tense situation. But anyway, this video from Neturei Karta came out on November 21st, 2023. Rabbi David Feldman from Neturei Karta International. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, that's when the video came out. It came out on November 21st, 2023, but the event took place on November 12th. The event took place on November 12th, 2023. Rabbi David Feldman from Neturei Karta International addressing mass rally for Gaza on Sunday, November 12th, 2023 in downtown Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. we have came out here today because of what we are witnessing already for weeks. Unfortunately, this genocide taking place in Gaza, so many innocent men, women and children, mass murder. This is something that none of us should tolerate, and none of us should allow in the first place, and certainly not to continue without seeing any end to what is happening. As human beings, we are standing here condemning this mass murder. As Jewish people, we are here joining you all, joining the world's outcry. We are deeply pained by all what's happening, and especially when all of this is being done supposedly in our name. It's because we are Jewish people, and we know what suffering is. It was our families, our communities who suffered in the Holocaust, and we don't want to see this happen to anyone. It is because we are religious Jews, and sadly, our religion is being misused to justify all these crimes. A true desecration of God's name. We are here to clarify that masses of Jewish people the world over, including in occupied Palestine today, are against everything what is happening now and what is going on already for decades. So many people are intimidated by Zionist propaganda. So many Jewish people are seriously intimidated, and they don't have the courage to come out in public. But we are raising the voice of masses of Jewish people behind us. Just recently, about 2.5 weeks ago, our community in occupied Palestine in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, went out in a march on the streets of Jerusalem with Palestinian flags, expressing their solidarity with Palestine. Guess what happened? Guess what happened? They were attacked, arrested. Their synagogue was vandalized. Scholars were dragged out on the street in the middle of their studies. This is what happens to our people. Nobody should ever think that the state of Israel is only committing crimes against Palestine. They are oppressing whoever stands in their way, including Jewish people. Yes. All crimes committed in Palestine, not only now, but for the past over 75 years, is not only criminal according to international law. These are true crimes in Judaism. We have to remember, there is a great difference between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is a religion only, no politics to it, versus Zionism, the philosophy behind the state of Israel, which is a purely political movement and should never be confused. The Zionist propaganda wants you to believe, the Zionist movement wants the world to believe that all Jews support Israel and that the Jewish religion condones all what Israel stands for. Why do they do that? Why do they want to have you say so? Because they want to criticize whoever speaks up against these crimes that supposedly they are anti-Semitic. We should know better than that. We should not allow that accusation. We are condemning crimes being committed for such a long time. It happens to be embarrassingly enough that these crimes are done by some people of Jewish descent. I'm embarrassed, but we should stand up and condemn it. We should stand up. We have to remember, the state of Israel is not a Jewish state. It is a criminal state. You may call it a Zionist state, but never call it a Jewish state. Yes, we desperately need a ceasefire. But a ceasefire is way not enough. We have to realize and we have to understand, if we are truly concerned for the safety and security of all, then we have to understand and realize what is the root cause of all what is happening now. It's not a difference of religion. We had differences of religion for the longest time, and Jewish people lived in peace in Palestine. A minority of Jewish people were respected and protected by the majority of Muslims. Why? Because we were brotherly in peace and harmony until this political movement of Zionism came in, misrepresented the Jewish people and destroyed that peace that did exist. We have to stop the cause to the problem, and we have to stop this occupation of Palestine in its entirety. We pray to Almighty God that this stops soon, and we hope this stops peacefully with no more suffering of anyone. We had enough, so many lives lost. So much Nakba, so much catastrophe. Enough is enough. We are pleading with Canada. We are pleading with the United States. We are pleading with the world over. Please stop this bloodshed. Once this occupation will stop, once this obstacle to peace will stop, once this cause to bloodshed will stop, we can hope to see once again that beautiful peace that did exist in Palestine. Let's hope that this will be the future sooner nowadays. Judaism, yes. Zionism, no. The state of Israel must go. The state of Israel must go. Judaism, yes. Zionism, no. Judaism, yes. Zionism, no. The state of Israel must go. The state of Israel must go. We are here as human beings, because we are so disturbed and so pained by all what is going on, this genocide taking place in Gaza already for weeks, where we have so many innocent men, women and children being mass murdered, which is unacceptable, and every righteous person the world over has to stand up and condemn and do everything we can to stop what is happening. But it's because we are Jewish people, we are even way more pained by what is being done supposedly in our name. And sadly, our religion, the Jewish religion, is being misused to justify all these crimes. This is unacceptable. This is not the Jewish people. This is not the Jewish religion. We have masses of Jewish people worldwide who disagree, who condemn all what is taking place. And all these crimes are not only a violation of international law. These are true violations of Judaism, killing and stealing, oppressing an entire people. All of this is totally forbidden in Judaism. We have to understand that what we are seeing, what we are witnessing now, what we are witnessing for the longest time, is all this Nakba, this catastrophe, this suffering of so many people involved here is not because of a difference of religion. We had differences of religion for the longest time. Unfortunately, it's the occupation of Palestine, this brutal, criminal occupation of Palestine, which is going on for over 75 years, unfortunately is causing this endless cycle of bloodshed where everyone suffers. And in order to stop this, we have to address the root cause. Unless this occupation stops in its entirety, God forbid what will continue to happen. We cannot afford more lives being lost. We cannot afford what we are seeing now. This cannot, this should not, this may not continue even one day, even 10 minutes. Because as they say, every 10 minutes a child is being killed. This is terrible. This is unacceptable. We have to stop this. We are here in Montreal, in downtown Montreal, and we call out to the government of Canada. We call out to the world. We have to acknowledge that what is taking place is wrong. This has to stop for the sake of everyone involved. Obviously, the oppressed people of Palestine should deserve better than they, unfortunately, than they're experiencing now. But it's also the Jewish people who are in danger and who are suffering. We have so many innocent Jewish people who don't support this occupation, who are against this occupation. Unfortunately, just because Netanyahu, just because the state of Israel insists to represent them, therefore they are becoming incorporated into this conflict. This has to stop. We hope that this stops in its entirety, and we hope that it stops peacefully with no more suffering around it.
And what do you say to people who say that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic?
Not at all. Criticizing Israel is criticizing crimes. It's criticizing people who commit the crimes. Israel has nothing to do with the Jewish people. Judaism and Zionism is not one and the same. Judaism is a religion, Zionism is a political movement. The only connection the state of Israel has with Judaism is that some people from Jewish descent are running this country in total contrast to Judaism.
And can you tell us a bit of history about the Zionism movement?
Well, the Zionist movement started by non-religious people who hated God and hated religion. It happens to be that the philosophy of Zionism is in total contrast of basics of Jewish belief. And it is committing so many crimes which is unacceptable in Judaism. There is no way that one can put together the two. This is like the diametric opposites. Unfortunately, Zionist propaganda manages to have people think and believe that all of this is the same. And why is this done? This is done on purpose, because they want to silence you. That if you speak up against Israel, then supposedly you're criticizing all Jews or criticizing the Jewish religion. This is false, this is unacceptable, this is unfortunately leading to just more death and destruction.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Keeping up with the situation Dr. Weisfeld has with a court battle and utilizing a very interesting contradiction within the law to actually get the police to protect them. Now, as I said before, Dr. Weisfeld doesn't actually endorse the police so far as we know, and we know that the police cannot be endorsed in any capacity. However, because of Dr. Weisfeld's brilliance and is able to use contradictions in the law and to use civil society to turn on the state, which is something that seems to be eluding a lot of Marxist-Leninists these days. But anyway, that's not the point. He has police protection. However, the police, of course, are technically protecting the building from him in case he tries to make a run for the entrance. So what you're seeing here is from November 19, 2023. I hope this in time will serve as a record. I'm really sad and frustrated, though, that he's by himself here. Any activists in Quebec who understand this cause should stand with him here. One Holocaust does not justify another.
Okay, here we are. Again, another police car has come up to protect me. Yes, in addition to the 2 other police cars that are over here. And the security guard to protect the building against me in case I decide to make a charge for the door. And here we are, you know, like with a sign saying, not in our name. Not in our name! Nicht auf unsere Nummer! Geracht! Not in our name. No war, no more. Okay? Not in our name. No war, no more. Not in our name. No war, no more. Not in our name. Not in our name. No war, no more. Not in our name. Not in our name. No war, no more. So the Israel flag, a new copy, has been raised to full height now in front of the Jewish community campus here. And there seems to be a higher degree of sympathy for anti-war sentiment now than there was even in the previous week. There's a nice man over there who gave me encouragement. Okay. Bye for now, I'll be back.
This next one, which is a follow-up, came out on November 26, 2023.
So here we are at the campus communautaire juif de Montréal, Montreal Jewish Community Campus. And it says the top of the list is Federation 68, Combined Jewish Appeal. which is the association that had me arrested before when I went into that entranceway there along the way to the Holocaust Museum. And this is the Cummings House, as it's called. And there's the Jewish Public Library with 4 of my books there in the catalog. And the other side is the Holocaust Museum. So I'm going to start, setting up here now, so we can have a look. And this is my painting, which is my sign for today. Here we go. Yeah, one Holocaust does not justify another, with the website of the Jewish Socialist Bund, Jewish-Socialist-Bund.net. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to put you on now.
Just so we don't lose anyone's attention, here's some audio from Richard Meldhirsch. This is, I think, a type of slam poetry.
I'm done, man. You know, I've had enough. I've had enough of Israel killing 15,000 Palestinians and calling that self-defense. I've had enough of the media calling Israeli hostages hostages, but Palestinian hostages prisoners. You're upset about 200 Israeli hostages, but oh, you didn't know there are 10,000 Palestinian hostages? Please, enough. I've had enough of Israel throwing Palestinians in prison without charge, without trial, without even telling them the reason why. I've had enough of Israel bringing up the Holocaust as it carries out a Holocaust against Palestinians. What happened to never again? Or is it never enough? I've had enough of Palestinians being punished for European crimes and Europeans giving away land that ain't theirs to divide. I've had enough of seeing children's bodies blown to bits and parents crying their eyes out. Where are my kids? Half of Gaza's population are children. So if you've bombed half the buildings, who are you hitting? Thousands are still under the rubble, all of them missing. Enough of this shit, enough of this killing. I've had enough of spoiled Israeli settlers complaining from their cushy hotels, while Palestinians sleep in the rain with no clothes, no food, and no beds. And Israelis have the nerve to pretend that they are oppressed? Shut your goddamn mouth. Do you know I've lost count how many times Israel have bombed the same refugee camp or the same hospital? Do you need to bomb a UN school 100 times before you've had enough? Israelis driving Palestinians from their homes, another Nakba in plain sight. Taking more land, taking more lives. Seems it's never enough. I've had enough of Israelis always playing the victim, even as they victimize Palestinians and commit genocide against them. It's tiring, exhausting, such a bore, and no one is falling for that crap anymore. Israel claims to be the Jewish state, but it's in a state of genocidal mania and doesn't speak for Jews. So many Jews around the world hate Zionism. They've had enough of this too. I've had enough of Israel claiming that Arabs hate Jews. This ain't about religion, they're lying to you. It's about Europeans stealing Palestinian homes. And if Israelis were Buddhists, Arabs would fight in too. I've had enough of talk show hosts acting like Middle East experts. Piers Morgan thinks history began on October 7. So the only trick he knows is bark, yes, Israel, then roll, and hounds his guests with, do you condemn Hamas? No, we condemn Israel in your rubbish program. I've had enough. I've had enough of Americans claiming Hamas are terrorists when Uncle Sam's the biggest terrorist on earth. They want to lecture people about human rights and international law, but when it comes to Israel, they don't give a fuck anymore. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Lebanon. Those weren't enough. How many people have to die before you wake up? Israel is carrying out a genocide in broad daylight, suffocating the dreams of Gaza's children at night. When will the world put an end to their plight? Jesus Christ, haven't they suffered enough? 15,000 people killed wasn't enough. Dozens of doctors and nurses wasn't enough. Israel killing journalists across the Levant. So many in Gaza went to bed and never woke up. What's your excuse? When are you gonna wake up? You need to find your humanity. Enough is enough.
Now I'm going to tear apart the rabbi of that conservative synagogue known as Park Avenue Synagogue. This sermon that he does took place on April 22nd, 2023.
Shabbat Shalom. In the pantheon of parenting pleasures, there are few that rank higher than the joy of taking your daughter out to dinner together with her friends. Debbie and I experienced that joy last week when we visited my oldest, who's presently spending a semester abroad. Passover had just ended. We were breaking bread, literally surrounded by my daughter's friends that she had just made, together with an assortment of her friends from high school, college, Israel programs, now all studying abroad, all seizing on the opportunity for a free meal.
Okay, everybody, brace yourselves. This is going to be quite the tear apart of this false rabbi, this fake rabbi, this Judophobic anti-Semite dressed up as a Jewish person. Oh, and it's a bit personal on this one, and that is why I have to attempt to be a bit calmer this time, so that I can be more precise. All right, here we go.
One of them had, in a manner of speaking, grown up in my home. In Hebrew, the expression is a bat bait, a daughter, in all ways save biology, of my household. For the purposes of today, I will call her Maya, if for no other reason than the name of every single one of my children consists of their friends of 4 letters, of which 2 are consonants and 2 are vowels. Nava, Nomi, Tali, Sari, Sarah, Ella, Emma, Ziva, Gavi, Gabi, Gali, Gila, Gili, Miri, Mira, Mara, Alex, Aviv, Rose, and Maya. So I'm enjoying my meal when Maya, 2 seats over, turns to me and says, "Rabbi Cosgrove," a verbal cue that signaled she was about to ask me something beyond another slice of pizza. "Rabbi Cosgrove," she said, "at Park Avenue Synagogue, do you have an Israeli flag on the bima?" To which I responded, "Yes, Maya, we have an Israeli flag on the bima." She then asked, "Rabbi Cosgrove, at Park Avenue Synagogue, do you recite the prayer for the state of Israel? To which I responded, yes, Maya, we recite the prayer for the state of Israel. Sensing where things were heading, I decided to redirect. Maya, you've been to services at Park Avenue Synagogue many times. What is it that you are really asking? It's over a week later, and the precise sequence of words that emerged out of Maya's mouth remains a bit blurry, perhaps due to the beers we were drinking or the fact that the words were spoken at all. But it went something like this. Rabbi, national flags are political statements. Zionism is a political ideology. Jews may be an ethno-religious group, but ethnicity does not have to be connected to nationality. I wish Jewish communities that claim to be politically unaffiliated would not officially affiliate with Zionism. Throughout history, nationalism has been used to oppress and cause suffering, and the Jewish people know this all too well. With the creation of Jewish nationalism, meaning Zionism, though the Jewish people have more protection, they have now become an oppressor to another group of people, the Palestinians. A Jewish nation-state will never be able to uphold Jewish values because nation-states are not able to. There have always been non-Zionist Jews. It's important to me that there be non-Zionist Jewish spaces because I want to practice Judaism and have a Jewish identity that does not involve nationalism.
Rabbi Cosgrove, that's how you pronounce his name. This is a bit embarrassing, seeming as the Americanization that has happened upon my culture, upon me personally, is very, I don't know, stressful. I can pick up Arabic words. When I say Hebraic terms, a lot of people have said that I have an Arabic accent, but when I talk normally, I stutter, and here you have me here. And if I'm not used to saying a word, typically I don't say it very well often. So Rabbi Cosgrove, yeah, that's his name. Anyway, this is how can he have memorized? I mean, I'm guessing he's paraphrasing whatever, or he could just be making this up for show. Although, no, I have a feeling that he is doing this because he has to address the situation. I mean, this does happen, friends of children, who are anti-Zionist end up often compromising the parents, putting them in a strange position. Although really what fake Rabbi Cosgrove, the lying bastard, is saying is, I'm about to save face. I have to save face because, oh no, we're losing the Zoomers. The Jewish Zoomers are all going anti-Zionist. That's because they can't close their eyes and they haven't been conditioned to accept a Holocaust on Gaza, such as you have, Cosgrove.
Maya is as sharp as they come. She is warm, wonderful, and very, very funny. She's not just a proud Jew, she's a knowledgeable Jew. Her father is actually Israeli-born. She's a product of Jewish day school, Jewish camping, synagogue youth, and Israel experiences. No small fortune has been invested in her Jewish identity by her parents and the organized Jewish community. And here, a non-Zionist manifesto spewing out of her mouth, the substance of which I had read about, but had never heard from someone whom I knew and cared about, as I do Maya. A young woman, and this is not a small point, who I joke shares a brain with my biological daughter. I was flabbergasted and, to be honest, flat-footed. I said nothing. I've played the scene back in my mind. Was I right or wrong to hold my tongue as I did? Was it because I was shocked, angry, or ill-prepared? The Mayas of the world are our people's best and brightest, the Jewish leaders of tomorrow. We are but days away from the 75th anniversary of Israel's birth. How shall one respond to a non-Zionist Jewish Gen Zer? Whatever regrets I do have, I'm comforted knowing I have something else, a pulpit. And this is what I wish I had said.
Oh, big man, you're going to weaponize a pulpit to basically rebuttal. I mean, Actually, no, Cosgrove, you're just scared. You're scared because you've already lost. Zionism is over. The state of Israel will be dismantled, and it will not come back. For those that actually believe that there will be Jewish return to that holy land, that would only come through the Messiah, and the Messiah will not come to boot out Christians and Muslims, contrary to popular belief. It doesn't work like that. Like the world, I don't like to say it the way Rabbi Weiss says it because I don't like the term metaphysical, because it's actually a Western chauvinist umbrella term for everything that's not materialism, therefore implying everything that is not materialism is somehow idealism. So I'm going to say mystical. There will be a mystical change around the world, and that's what's going to bring the Messiah, the Davidic Messiah. And that's if you actually believe in the Davidic Messiah to begin with, and if you do believe in the Davidic Messiah, you should only believe it in the context of the ultra-Orthodox, and only their interpretation on that would matter. Otherwise, there are those that believe that the Messiah will be an age. I have a very different, nuanced view, which I will not get into here right now, but get ready. This rebuttal, this rebuttal is going to get more intense, but it's just funny that, he has to weaponize his pulpit. Big man, Cosgrove. Yeah, you're a big man. Trying to outshout the Zoomers. The Jewish Zoomers are going to kick your ass one day. You'll have to answer to them.
Maya, first and foremost, I hear you. I hear you. Your voice is important, and you are not alone. Judaism is not Zionism. Zionism is not Judaism. And the flag on the bima and prayer for Israel are not uncomplicated things. There is indeed a long history of non-Zionist Jews, people who loved their Judaism but held what is called a non-statist view of peoplehood. Not whack jobs or self-hating or messianic-waiting Jews, but proud Jews, Bundists and labor Zionists, cultural Zionists, even religious Zionists, who had attachments to the land but not in establishing a state. Big names like Mordechai Kaplan, who saw the Jewish people as a national civilization, Simon Ravidovich, who believed in global Hebraicism, and Hans Cohen, who had a vision of Jewish cultural humanism. When political Zionism took hold in the late 1800s, it was rejected by the Orthodox and Reform movements. Louis Finkelstein, the past chancellor of JTS, where I became a rabbi, believed that nationalism was a root cause of World War I, and though he supported the idea of a Jewish national homeland as late as the 1940s, he saw no need for a Jewish state. Tuesday night is Yom HaAtzmaut. We're having a big concert, and Derek Penzler, a Harvard professor of Zionism, is going to be speaking. His forthcoming book on Zionism mentions that the first Zionist Congress did not call for a state, but a national home secured by Jewish public law, and that Herzl's vision didn't include a military or borders or many of the other trimmings of a state, and that even Jabotinsky and even Ben-Gurion at different times of their lives had non-statist visions of the Jewish homeland. Maya, there are some people, good people, my friends and mentors, who would call you for what you are saying an un-Jew. Those people throwing shade at you, Maya, trying to mess with your self-expression, those people need to calm down. Maya, you are not just not alone, you are a good Jew, and you stand in very good Jewish company. Maya, for someone of my generation, I can't imagine Judaism without Zionism. But I agree with you that Zionism is not Judaism. It is regrettable that the organized Jewish community made it seem so. When the state was founded in the wake of the Holocaust, American Jewry's support was critical. If we weren't going to move there, then we were going to support those who did philanthropically and politically. I understand why Israel advocacy was embraced as a tool for solidarity, a response to anti-Semitism, and a prophylactic against assimilation. We have our slogans, we march in our parades, we buy Israel bonds, we plant trees, and we write checks. Acts important unto themselves, but also as a rallying cry and a bonding agent for American Jews. It didn't happen all at once, but yes, somewhere along the way, this diaspora Zionism became, in the words of the late Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg, a substitute religion. Even worse, it became a litmus test for Jewish loyalty. In Hertzberg's words, the lack of support for Israel being the only offense for which Jews can be excommunicated. Support for Israel was instrumentalized to paper over the thinness of American Jewish identity. You know me, Maya. I am as big of a supporter of Israel travel, Israel study, birthright, and otherwise as there is. We need to give it all we got. But Maya, I am with you and then some, that if the strongest statement of Jewish pride and philanthropic muscle out there to reinvigorate Jewish American Jewry is to travel to Israel, then American Jewry has some serious soul searching to do. And yes, Maya, I also get it. When you look at Israel, when I look at Israel, when anyone looks at Israel, we see an Israel that stands in breach of many of our values, our Jewish values. Democracy, religious pluralism, gay rights, the Palestinian right to self-determination, the very ideals that your Jewish education has instilled in you. I am deeply worried about what will become of liberal Zionism should Israel cease to be a liberal democracy. How can I ask anyone to support an Israel that doesn't support their values, an Israel that doesn't even see you? The math is not complicated. 52% of young Israelis today are either Haredi or Arab. For them, non-Orthodox diaspora Jewry is an abstraction. A typical secular Israeli expends zero psychic energy thinking about the shared destiny of the Jewish people. Diaspora Jews play no role in Knesset politics. Why exactly should you care about a place that does not acknowledge you, care about you, or even think about you? Maya, you are not crazy. If you weren't asking the questions you are asking, now that would be crazy. Maya, I didn't say that the synagogue was apolitical. You did. It's a sermon for another day. But on a certain level, a synagogue, a good synagogue, is not only a house of prayer, but it's a place that helps Jews identify, explore, and wrestle with Jewish values and inspire them to realize values, sometimes through the instrument of politics in this world. And high on that list of values is love of Israel. Yes, there is a strand of non-Zionist thought embedded in the Jewish DNA. And yes, the project of Rabbinic Judaism took shape almost entirely outside of the land of Israel. But it is, I believe, a misreading of Jewish history to call Judaism anything else other than a land-centered faith. From God's first call to Abraham, to the land that I will show you, to our arrival in that promised land, through the first and second commonwealth, through the exile, in the words of our prayer, in the direction to which we pray, the rituals we observe, and the aspirations we hold, our eyes have always been turned towards Zion. Not just the shared faith, not just a language and culture, but an attachment to the land. To live there if you choose, and if you choose otherwise, to support those who do. It is, in my mind, fundamental to what it means to be a Jew today. It's why we have the flag on the bima. It's why we recite the prayer for the state of Israel. It's why I'm a proud Zionist. It's why I am politically engaged in Israel. And it's why I ask that of my congregants as well. And yes, Maya, we do live in a time when nationalism has become an ugly word, oftentimes for good reason. It would be nice to imagine, as John Lennon did, where there are no countries, nothing to kill or die for. But Maya, we need to live in the factual world, not the counterfactual. The rise of political Zionism, the establishment of the Jewish state, arose as a response to the belief that Jews have a moral right and historic need for self-determination within historic Palestine. If I needed an argument for Zionism, Jewish nationalism, statehood, whatever you want to call it, I could make the argument by way of 2,000 years of Jewish history and the exclamation point of the Shoah. But I don't need to. Jews have a right to self-determination.
Wow. What a diatribe of words. Like, wow. I have to look over these cliff notes that I have. I have these, like, posty stickies on bigger white sheets of paper so that I can keep track of the points here because, wow, I mean, really, this is incredible. Okay, so while it can be appreciated that this man did admit that Judaism is not Zionism and Zionism is not Judaism, while we can appreciate that he admits that they are not one and the same, Judaism and Zionism being actually not the same, having a thing that must be grasped finally for us Jewish people, finally, given our deluge of amnesia, which we are only now really fully recovering from. Having an American or Israeli flag in a synagogue is reprehensible. Having any nation-state flag within a synagogue is reprehensible. For in a synagogue, all allegiance must be for Hashem, or at least an allegiance to the Jewish diaspora, if one is a Jewish agnostic or a Jewish atheist. He brings up Bundes. Yeah, you have to bring up Bundes because now you have to contend with us. We're everywhere now. But then he goes on, mixes us up with labor Zionists, cultural Zionists, and religious Zionists. That is unforgivable. Because labor Zionists were the ones who actually really got the state of Israel off the ground. Cultural Zionists are some of the biggest hypocrites in the world. You know, they're really mostly just a front ideology for other versions of Zionism. And religious Zionists are very much for the for this concept of a Jewish state. They think that the Zionist state is a placeholder for a Jewish state which is yet to come, which is absolutely nonsense because the very concept of a Jewish state actually negates Judaism. For instance, how many people are aware that if you actually believe in the Solomonic, Davidic Solomonic Messiah, that Messiah would actually resemble more of a Hasidic Rebbe in style, a king, but not a monarch, a king who basically does not have to coerce people with an arm of a state, the sovereignty being that his scepter is recognized by all, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. You know, this is just really, really, really stupid what he's saying here. I mean, and he brings up Herzl, but Herzl was a rabid anti-Semite, a typical secularist, which is what this so-called rabbi is. He's not preaching Judaism. As I said in the previous video, he's preaching secularism. Now remember, there's two kinds of secularism. There's anti-religion secularism, and then there's the inclusive secularism. The United States of America's culture is primarily guided by an inclusive secularism, which is a problem because when you have inclusive secularism, which tries to include everybody, the dominant religious group usually, under the guise of the secular tools, will then coerce or shut down or assimilate or annihilate the other religious groups. That's why secularism is no good. Secularism is the market. It is the culture of capitalism. Secularism is the culture of capitalism, and capitalism is the economy of secularism. There can be no mistake about this. And again, you have to separate secular from secularism. Secular, lowercase s, secular, has to do with certain public services in civil society. And if you understand how any democracy must work, the civic order must be above both secular and religious institutions. And both are necessary. That is why secularism is such a poison. Not to be confused with secular. I'm not sure if he's trying to make a reference to humanistic Judaism, but let's also be clear. Humanistic Judaism is completely Zionist in its essence and very much for the Zionist state. I don't know what he means when he says messianic waiting Jews. Is he referring to the Jews for Jesus, or is he trying to insult the ultra-Orthodox? Now, I've noticed something. A lot of the viewers of Park Avenue Synagogue, who I had been somewhat acquainted with out here, because, I used to tolerate this Rabbi Cosgrove for reasons, I don't live near an Orthodox community, unfortunately. So sometimes when I'm really just wishing I was in a shul because of how traumatic and isolating it is not to be in a shul, I sometimes have been known to not do the Orthodox thing and turn on the phone and watch on a YouTube, live Park Avenue Synagogue. This has happened to me a couple times. It's not what I'm supposed to do, but it's, like I said, the isolation. And, one time, one of these people I speak of that I'm acquainted with, one time I, was hanging out with this person, just walking by, and he turned on his phone, because everybody's got YouTube on their phone now. I hate that, but, everybody has YouTube on their phone. And he had, Park Avenue Synagogue live on Shabbos. That's very unorthodox to do that. And, what was weird is that I got to know this guy over a period of 4 weeks. This was last year, by the way. And this same guy, he's friends with a lot of people who are big fans of Park Avenue Synagogue, probably because they have the best cantor ever, which is so not fair. And, but the point being is that this same guy got all of his friends to watch the 4-part series Unorthodox, and they're using that as an excuse to start rallying cries to get the law to destroy the ultra-Orthodox in Brooklyn. See, all of this is connected. I cannot shut my eyes off to how all of this is connected. And this rabbi is speaking to save face because he's afraid of the future. He fears the future. There's other types of Zionism too, such as diaspora Zionism, which some people try to confuse with Bundism. Diaspora Zionism is not Bundism. It's not even territorialism. Territorialism, I would maintain, is real Jewish supremacy, because Zionism is not Jewish supremacy. Zionism is actually white supremacy. But territorialism, for what it's worth, yes, it is Jewish. I would say it's Jewish supremacy, but it is not. But the way territorialism works is that the land sought would not be inhabited by other people. That's part of the theory of territorialism. Diaspora Zionism is different. Now, the only group I know of that does diaspora Zionism I had learned about from Miriam Emmisberg. And Miriam taught me about the Singlung. That's either in India or Pakistan or something, and they want to build a Jewish state in that area. Diaspora Zionism, gets conflated with Bundism, and there can be no conflation, because Bundism, we aim for national cultural autonomy. We do not aim for territorialism, and we don't aim for the aspirations of diaspora Zionism. So I feel like I had to bring that up. But it's just, there seems to be, this guy's dog whistling and virtue signaling at the same time. I mean, it's incredible. Only a Zionist could do something like that, manage to dog whistle and virtue signal at the same time. And this is why I do hope that people who care about democracy may start to ask, maybe secular humanism really is destroying society. Humanism is not humanitarianism. Humanism means we put humans first at the expense of the environment. where we should be humanitarian, and a real humanitarian is for environmentalism and seeks a living harmony reciprocal between nature and man and woman. This is so absurd, the way he praises the Zionists as if they stopped assimilation. Zionists don't stop assimilation. In fact, Zionism has been the primary cause of assimilation. Zionism was more effective at assimilating Jewish people than the Soviet Union had been. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I am not an enemy of the Soviet Union. I have defended the Soviet Union on multiple occasions, but I will not be an apologist for the way that they repressed religion. Now, I want to be fair. They didn't actually criminalize religion. That's a misnomer. They repressed it. But still, repression is wrong. Repression leads to criminalization. Repression of Jewish anti-Zionists and actual Jewish culture of any sort in the United States has been rampant for a long time. And that repression is becoming criminalization as it's becoming more obvious to people that Jewish people are not in league with Zionism and that we actually oppose it. This non-Jewish bastard is not objective, despite his talent for spinning words for Zionist apologism. And let's be real, this man doesn't care about the Palestinians. He doesn't care about the Palestinians. He can't imagine Judaism without Zionism. I can't imagine Judaism with Zionism. And I'm speaking for the majority of us here. You know, that the Zionists have managed to coerce, you know, the government in Quebec to persecute Dr. Abraham Weishaupt. He's literally suffering under a political prejudice, you know, because of the freaking Zionists. Judaism is not a land-centered faith. Judaism is a journey-centered faith, you freaking idiots. If you read the Sefer Moshe, the 5 books of Moses, they never actually go to the Holy Land. They never actually get there. They just get to the Holy Land and it ends at that. Because the idea was the journey there. To draw a parallel, since this guy likes to use Martin Luther King, who, to be fair, Martin Luther King, unlike Malcolm X, was in favor of the state of Israel. That's one of the reasons why I don't like to cite Martin Luther King. I don't really like him. I prefer Malcolm X. But anyway, Judaism is not a land-centered faith. It's a journey-centered faith. In fact, calling it a faith is so crispy. I don't like that. No, Judaism is, by definition, a cultural religion. There is no debate about this. That's what it is. I mean, that should be obvious if you pay attention to Dr. Abraham Weishaupt or the rabbis of Neturei Karta. He basically makes the reference to nationalism and, and then tries to trivialize it, bringing up John Lennon. Very effective, because here in the United States, unlike people outside the United States, we know that John Lennon was a piece of shit. He was real scum. John Lennon was a person who basically, emotionally abused his son, was a hedonist, did nothing for civil rights. He made stupid little protests and he preached hedonism like all the freaking hippies did. The hippies had no part in the civil rights movement. John Lennon was one of the people that backed that stupid free love crap. The free love crap, where everybody experimented, and it was a disaster. People became suicidal, their lives fell apart because, try on, this person, that person. And I'm not attacking polyamory. I'm talking about free love, which is just shallow as fuck. That is not an insult to anybody that was involved in the sexual revolution. I do want to make that clear, but I'm not going to mince words and lie and placate when I know how disastrous certain things are. Free love has been proven repeatedly to not work. And, he brings up John Lennon as a way of trying to minimize, the problem of nationalism, when nationalism is in fact the ideology invented by George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. And the concept of it is that the nation is fused with the state, and that has been a disaster. And it did lead to World War I. It's not that, some will say, some Zionists or, Jewish people or whatever, believe that it led to World War I. It did cause World War I. It amped up the capitalism, and all wars are fought over land and resources. Using the Holocaust to justify fascism is absolutely reprehensible and intolerable, inexcusable. This man should be disbarred from all public spaces. our autodetermination has never been reached because of the Zionists. All they have done is use us as blue chips, rob us of our culture, take away our religion, put a counterfeit version of that religion in, and we are still starving from within, like looking for who we are. The sect that my mother was from no longer exists because of the Zionist persecution. This man comes off to many people as objective, but he is not. This man brings up Theodor Herzl, but Theodor Herzl was one of the most rabid anti-Semites of all time. If you've ever actually read the shit that Herzl talked about, he talked about Jewish people letting go of their Jewishness, like abandoning it. So, like, forget Judaism for a second. Herzl opposed Jewishness. Anyway, continuing.
To be the subject of our own sentence and not the object of someone else's. We can quibble whether we are a faith, an ethnicity, a people, or a collective, but that debate is a distraction. We are Jews.
There is no debate. We are a cultural religion. We are a cultural religious group, and that is something that constitutes a nation. Nations are either ethnic cultures or they are religious cultures. That is what nations have always been, and Stalin and Lenin don't change that. Of course, he's not advocating Stalin or Lenin. You know, like Stalin would probably rightfully send somebody like this to the gulag, and I'd be laughing if it happened. Well, I mean, maybe that's a bit harsh, but no, well, no, it's not. This guy would be laughing if I was hauled off to prison. That's not very principled of me, I suppose, but like, this is just tiresome that that people with pulpits like this continue to spew their venom. I didn't finish my point about MLK, Martin Luther King, before, so I'll do it now. Martin Luther King Jr. Did support the state of Israel. It's actually a fact. Some people say that if he understood the real nature behind the Zionist state, that he wouldn't have done so, and maybe that's true. But, you know, the "we shall overcome nonviolence" thing just didn't work. Real results came from Malcolm X, and then more effectively from the Black Panther Party. This is just unreal what this guy says. This is just... All right, we're going to continue here.
Nations, borders, the right to self-defense, that is the coin of the day. That is the factual. The world changed on May 14th, 1948. I can imagine going back in time to sit in a 19th century Viennese coffee shop to debate whether we should be Zionists, just as I can imagine living in a world without antibiotics. But I have no desire to do either.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we should not be subjugated by other nations for them to determine our destiny. It is for us to determine our own destiny through national cultural autonomy, not nationalism. As far as like, gosh, man, this weaponizing of the Holocaust is really pissing me off. One Holocaust does not justify another. One Holocaust does not justify another. One Holocaust does not justify another. You know, it's so convenient for Rabbi Cosgrove to leave out the part where the ghetto police that the Nazis hired, the Jewish ghetto police that the Nazis hired, they were all Zionists. It's a fact. And in mass, Jewish people were saying no to the newly formed United Nations when the plan was drawn up for there to be a so-called Jewish state. We in mass said no, and we were ignored because, well, the UN is for secularism because it's capitalist. And, you know, rather than go to the Jewish people themselves, which they did not, they'd rather have listened to the Zionists. But let's continue here.
Does Israel's right of sovereignty clash with the Palestinians' self-same right? Of course it does. Should Israel, no different than the Palestinians, be held responsible for its role in obstructing a two-state solution? Absolutely. Israel is a deeply imperfect state that, just like any nation state, falls short of its stated values. But Maya, given the choice of a sovereign and imperfect Israel or the moral purity of exiled victimhood, I would choose the former over the latter any day, and so should you. And if Maya, you would deny your own people the self-same right that you would fight for on behalf of others, well, that is an act of self-abnegation that is more of a you problem than it is Israel's. I didn't choose to live during this era of history side by side with the sovereign state of Israel. But I do, and I'm grateful that I do, and you should be too. Israel is the greatest achievement of the Jewish people in the past century, if not the entirety of our existence, the expression of a multi-millennial hope, the home to half of our people.
Oh, wow. Like, wow, really. Like, no. First of all, the two-state solution is bullshit. The state of Israel simply has no right to exist. I am understanding to those that speak for a one Palestinian state. I do understand that argument, and I'm more accepting towards those that say that, but I do see the flaws with that as well. What is necessary is a multinational federation, where all the territorial rights belong to the Palestinians. The Hebrews, who call themselves Israeli, do not need territorial rights. There's a couple things that would happen of these people once we get rid of the state of Israel. Many of them will rediscover Judaism, possibly become Palestinian by integrating with the Palestinians. And by the way, Jewish people integrating into Palestinian culture would not assimilate Judaism. That's one of the cases where it would tremendously enhance, Judaism and Jewishness for those people. Also, the Hebrews I can see that a lot of them, afterwards would probably convert to the Baha'i faith or other religions. Because the simple truth is, if you know anything about the state of not really Israel, a lot of them no longer believe in Judaism or even hold anything that it resembles Jewishness. This is apologism for secular humanistic garbage. This is apologism for settler colonialism, for fascism. This is extremely anti-democratic, this position that this fake rabbi is holding. Again, in a proper democracy, the civic order is above both religious and secular institutions. Secularism doesn't allow this. What's needed is democracy worldwide. What's needed is Antifa worldwide. What's needed is an end to Zionism and an end to Americanism. The United States of America doesn't really have a right to exist either. It's a settler colonial project. The natives of this land, they want their land back. They must have their land back. This also applies to Canada, New Zealand, and Australia as well. This man comes from a place of overgrossed privilege. He is not coming from the place of Judaism. He really should be disbarred from all public spaces.
I may not live there, but as long as I live, to be a Jew means to understand Israel as a constituent part of my Jewish being. Because today, Maya, Israel is not just troubled and troubling, Israel is on the brink. The fault lines have broken open before our very eyes. The future of Israel as a democracy, the outbreak of a third intifada, Israel's loss of standing in the community of nations, the bitter irony that it's in the Jewish state where one cannot practice their Judaism freely. It's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of 500,000 Israelis protesting on the streets every week.
You know, one of the problems here is that, and Democracy Now! Is actually severely guilty of this as well, claiming that the current Netanyahu government is somehow ultra-Orthodox, which it's not. The ultra-Orthodox completely oppose the existence of the State of Israel. Claiming that it's theocratic, it's not theocratic. You know, in Demarchist theory, there are those that refer to theocracy as something that actually is impossible to implement today, and that, you know, it couldn't exist in any practical sense. But there's also that other, you know, dispute within Demarchist circles that there never actually was a such thing as theocracy. That, for instance, the Caliphate wasn't a theocracy. It was the first official religious welfare state, possibly even welfare empire. But, you know, that's another thing. The Amish are not a theocracy. The Amish are a religious commune by definition. I mean, so it's questionable whether theocracy is really a thing, or yet another Western verbal hologram, you know, in an attempt to concretize the past and use linear periodization. Nothing that this man is saying here speaks to the broader Jewish masses. The State of Israel is not our constituent in any way. It is not a safe haven or a getaway in case the United States decides to genocide us. As bad as the United States of America is, it is safer for Jewish people to be in the United States of America than it is the State of Israel. When the Tree of Life synagogue was attacked, Israel, the State of Israel, its leadership showed no solidarity at all. You may have had a bit of lip service maybe from some of the civil society within those Hebrews, but not much. And the State of Israel is a dictatorship that is hoisted upon us. For instance, it's the Hanukkah season right now, and I value Hanukkah very deeply because it is the holiday that represents the resistance against assimilation. But, you know, when you get, if you want wrapping paper for a little gift, you always see this blue and white colors, you know, like there's always this subversive sort of connection to the Israeli flag that, you know, is always connected to things that we, you know, purchase. It's so fucked up. The State of Israel, we have no vote in it. In the previous video, you had pointed out that we have no vote in Israel, Cosgrove. What's wrong with you? How is it a constituent? The fact is, you like the birthright trips. You like the indoctrination of your children. You want all of the Jewish people assimilated to the point where they're not Jewish. And so, like, if you're afraid of the rising Kahanist, you know, the rising Kahanist ultra-nationalist nightmare, well, guess what? You're contributing to it, and that's not an aberration. I'm going to go further. The State of Israel is not even religious Zionist. It's Kahanist. Kahanism is not religious Zionism. It's more of a spiritual, cultural Zionism of some kind. You know, it is the final step. It basically, what Kahanism really represents is a restoration of Herzl's original Zionist theory, but put into a sort of spiritual, not religious context, where rabbis are on the pulpit just like Cosgrove, but they spin things in whatever direction they want, just as Meir Kahane did. The State of Israel is anti-Semitic, both in the Islamic context and the Jewish context. It is Islamophobic and Judophobic. The State of Israel is also Christophobic as well. Christophobia does not apply everywhere, unlike anti-Semitism. Christophobia applies to those that are part of the Eastern Orthodox churches and those that are part of the Oriental Orthodox churches. It applies to Byzantine Catholics. It applies to the Chaldeans. as well as the Assyrians. It doesn't really apply to Roman Catholics all over the world, though, but it does apply to Roman Catholics in the United States. Not in Quebec, actually. The Roman Catholics of Quebec are the bourgeoisie of Quebec, and they pretty much control everything. And I'd go further and probably say this is the same as the case for Canada. Canada is Roman Catholic as well. You know, there's no Christophobia that they have to go through over there. But Roman Catholics within Palestine are persecuted and suffer from Christophobia. Christophobia is everywhere in the state of Israel. It's kind of funny how, you know, the right-wing evangelical nut jobs within the United States are so cheeky with freaking Netanyahu. King Bibi, you know, cites evangelical Christian prophecies instead of Jewish prophecies. Rabbi Shapiro from Satmar has pointed this out more than once. And while I have several disagreements with Rabbi Shapiro of Torah Jews, formerly known as True Torah Jews, he often hits the nail on the head when it comes to the, you know, the hypocrisy and the literal lunacy of Zionism. False Rabbi Cosgrove, you are an anti-Semite. And I've often tried to figure out whether you are aware of what you're doing or if you're doing it consciously. But I'm more of the position as time goes by that you're consciously doing this, because you've done so many virtue signals and dog whistles in this same sermon.
Is some of this pain self-inflicted? Absolutely. Has the complicit silence of American Jewry helped enable our present state of affairs? I think we agree on that. So let's stop living in the past and start asking what to do now. There is a book by the late political economist Albert Hirschman called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. Hirschman explains that once one sees a business, nation, or any human grouping in crisis, there's a choice to be made. One can either exit, meaning walk away, or one can have voice, meaning attempt to repair or change that relationship through grievance, engagement, or activism. There are those who would say that to criticize Israel is a sign of disloyalty. I say otherwise. As always, there is a question of tact. The Torah reading, if nothing else, warns us about how our words and actions can be received and redirected in ways that we never intended. But no different than my activism as an American as an expression of, not counter to, my patriotism, so too my Zionism. If 500,000 Israelis can express their love and concern by way of protesting its government, so can I, so do I, and Maya, so can you. It is Israel's 75th birthday, and Israel is in crisis. Are you going to exit, walk away, and stand on the sidelines, or are you going to have voice?
Maybe Maya should consider Bundism. How about that? Oh, by the way, if anybody wants to know where John Lennon was murdered, he was murdered in New York City. So despite the shining the light on how much of a terrible person John Lennon was, I do want to make clear that the person who murdered him is unexcusable. He was murdered by a fanatic. But this legacy of the hippie shit, of 60s peace, love, free love crap, which had nothing to do with the civil rights movement, seems to be, you know, the language in which this man likes to speak. Like, he speaks as self-defense, but he makes reference to Martin Luther King Jr. And to be fair to Martin Luther King Jr., he was way more effective than the freaking Beatles, who cared nothing but hedonism. You know that their primary place where all four of them lived was a very bougie, I believe it was actually a hotel, I think, in London. Like, they lived in the absolute lap of luxury. This gets into the problem of where, you know, when you get at the root of every one of the major religions, they are actually anti-capitalist at their core. And they're pro-socialist at their core, all of them. You know, and you don't need to liberalize religion. You don't need to secularize it. That's not necessary. In fact, that actually causes more harm than anything. You also don't need to make it a conservative chauvinist system. You know, some would say, well, conservative Judaism is not very conservative. And, you know, that depends on what you mean by conservative. Politically conservative? No, conservative Judaism is not politically conservative. It's conservative in the sense that it is normative Judaism. It isn't orthodox, but it's normative, so halakha is taken seriously. The best thing about the boon for everybody who's Jewish, who's interested, is you don't have to be observant. You know, you could be religious, you could be observant, you know, and I'm Jewish Orthodox personally, but anybody who's of Jewish conservative, Jewish reform, or Jewish reconstructionalist, you know, is free to be part of the boon. Anybody Jewish who really doesn't practice much of anything is, you know, eligible to be in the boon. What matters is if you're willing to defend the Torah culture. And let's be clear here, the Torah culture, you know, doesn't negate the Jewish atheists or the Jewish agnostics, you know, and Zionism doesn't have that inclusivity, despite the way that it's often depicted. Zionism is very much about groupthink and, you know, to follow the leader, you know, and his nonsense, you know, and there's nothing really wrong with being a leader, you know, but a leader who leads must lead by the example of righteousness. And if you need a more political, mundane term, by principle. Zionist leadership is really about people not questioning. In Judaism, questioning is essential. In fact, this is kind of what gives Jewishness its, you know, its flair for a great deal of Jewish people. Jewishness and Judaism are not the same thing, and both are relevant, and they're both intertwined. But Jewishness is more about consciousness, whereas Judaism is more about the culture and the religion. But that Jewishness, that consciousness, is one of criticalness, of questioning, you know, of arguments. There are no real arguments in Zionism. People will point at the Knesset and say, "Oh, they're arguing." But they're very vague arguments. Like it's like, how much shall we occupy, or how far will we occupy? You know, the stuff. You know, like, or will we agree with the two-state solution? Or the one Zionist state solution. I mean, their arguments don't go very far. Zionism, I've made this joke many times, but, you know, it's worth bringing up. Zionists live on planet military. Jewish people live on planet library. You know, and one thing you'll know about soldiers is that they're not encouraged to think. Soldiers follow orders. Warriors have agendas. And, you know, it's better to be a warrior than a soldier. And I'm not advocating really either, because Judaism really actually doesn't glorify the warrior. But warriors inevitably do happen in our history. There are Jewish warriors that are very much Jewish. But we don't uplift the warrior. We uplift the scholar. We believe in academies and universities. In Orthodox Judaism, the most important place is not the synagogue, but the yeshiva. You know, the yeshiva is the womb of the Jewish culture, where, you know, the Talmud is explored. Let's just continue.
And leverage your moral Jewish compass and the piercing clarity of your conscience to effectuate change, to fight for your values, and to help Israel realize the fullness of its founding vision.
Which founding vision would be that? Which founding vision are we talking about? Are we talking about the one where the Jewish people completely lose who they are and become somebody that we're not through assimilation and cultural genocide? The vision of annihilating the Palestinians? The vision of harassing the Jewish Palestinians, erasing the Christian Palestinians, depicting every single Muslim Palestinian as a terrorist? Which vision are you talking about? Really? Because the only vision of really that Zionism and the Zionist state have in mind is fascism.
Given the ideals you champion, given the age you are, why on earth would you cede the discussion of what Zionism is and what it should be to those who are either true enemies of our people or your Jewish kin who would corrupt Zionism into something it is not and should never be? I know you know the song, Maya, Ein li eretz acheret. I will not keep silent. I have no country, lo eshtok. I will not keep silent, ki artzi shinta et panea. Even if my country has changed her face, azkirla, I will remind her, ad shetiftach et eineha, until she opens her eyes. Encounter, Truah, Zionist, Seeds of Peace, Roots, Israel Policy Forum. There's no shortage of organizations fighting the good fight, and I know, because I know, they would welcome your engagement. Maya, let me end where I began. I hear you. Your voice is important, and you are not alone.
You're right, she's not alone. She's the future, and you're afraid of it. This is just insane here. I mean, Zionism, what you're seeing, the Zionism that is today with Netanyahu and that current government is no aberration. That's the true face of Zionism. The Zionists have become what they always were. It's interesting before he brings up labor Zionists and cultural Zionists and religious Zionists that he brings up Bundists first. I think that this man is very calculated in what he's doing. The two-state solution is already killed. And there will be no one Zionist state solution. There needs to be an alternative. I mean, I'm not really upset per se with a one Palestinian state, but I think that that's not going far enough with the problematic at hand. This man claims that our religion is a land-based faith. It's not. It's a journey-based one. It's one of repairing the world, tikkun olam, of being a light unto the nations. And to be a light unto the nations, really, that is most successful when we have no sovereignty at all. Of course, we need liberation, but that liberation comes through autonomy. And as the world comes to an age and decolonization is on people's minds, this is the opportunity for us to reach out to the Native Americans and show more of them, hey, you're Noahides, and you don't need to convert to a religion to do that. You already have your traditions that constitute this very thing. Palestine I believe Palestine will serve as the example of what interfaith democracy looks like, where not only someone Jewish, Christian, or Muslim is free and, liberated, but that a place where even atheists and agnostics who are not of any religion are free to be there, or where Christian atheists and Jewish atheists are free to be part of Judaism without belief in the divine. I believe Palestine is going to be the centerpiece of what successful interfaith democracy looks like. I believe it will be the centerpiece to bringing about lasting world peace through socialism. But this cannot occur as long as the state of Israel exists. Let's just finish up here.
As your friend's father and as the rabbi of a synagogue, I am proud of you and I am here for you. Not only do you have a place in the Zionist conversation, it's a conversation that depends on you. We may not always agree, but make no mistake, now more than ever, we need you. The community needs you. And on its 75th birthday, Israel needs you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say in response. But this last piece of pizza, Maya, it's getting cold. Let's go halvesies, and I'll order us another beer. Let's keep this conversation going. Shabbat Shalom.
one thing that is very obvious about fake Rabbi Cosgrove, this literally Gentile bastard, is that he is afraid he's afraid because he sees that within the Jewish community, Jewish Zionists and Jewish anti-Zionists, we've been in a social cultural ceasefire with each other for like most of this, for a long time, and that ceasefire is over. Now, mind you, when I speak of ceasefire, I'm not talking about the ceasefire that people are calling for with the situation in Gaza. I'm talking about something within the Jewish community worldwide. Jewish non-Zionists and Jewish anti-Zionists and, Jewish Zionists have been kind of in a stalemate with each other for a while. But that's over. It's over. And he's afraid of the future. And it's really troublesome that people misconstrue this man as being objective. He's very crafty. I think the most embarrassing thing for me, and this is one of the reasons why I had to do this, is when looking over the PDFs from my friends, my martyred friends, they had mentioned both Central Synagogue and Park Avenue Synagogue. And I hadn't realized when I started watching, every so often Park Avenue Synagogue, that this was actually what Hannah Toff thought was the most dangerous thing to conservative Judaism. Hannah Toff was into conservative Judaism. I have a lot of unfinished business, and I'm going to do it all because I have other things to do. I don't want to disappoint Dr. Weisfeld, but I will only be with the Boon for so long. I have unfinished business that I have to prioritize. I reach out to Dr. Weisfeld, and I do hope that he adopts this this position, and I want to make something clear to people. From the outside looking in, I think a lot of people are confused by the actual conversation between me and Dr. Weisfeld. I've always felt or thought that Dr. Weisfeld expects me to adopt his views on every subject. I even wrote that down for the manifesto thing called Manual for Revolution. I even had referenced that, but not as an attack on him, but literally a defense for myself because people have consistently claimed that I placate to Dr. Weisfeld, which is not true. In fact, Dr. Weisfeld and me, we're bonded culturally. That's what a lot of people, I think, get upset with, is that we are permanently bonded with each other culturally. But we're also kind of in a position where we're so stressed, and we've both traumatized each other over arguments with heated things, because all of you interferers, who try to tell me or him how to do stuff, especially on how to, recover everything now that I don't have Donna Newman to rely on, and I have to reach out to him and say this. I've been very dependent on Donna Newman. This is one of the ailments I've had. I have your camera. It's my camera. You're not getting it back. Thank you so much for the camera. But I have the camera. I am trying to get to protests. I don't always know where these protests are, but I've met some of these protesters, and I don't have comrade number 3 for transportation. He has not returned from the urban yet, but I am in contact with him. And he has a lot of the same ideas in mind with me. I have unfinished business with literature, which is more necessary now to publish than ever, but it's not in my hands. It's not in my inventory. But I have a camera. What I want to do, because I've led a lot of demonstrations, but even with my own Bundist unit, I was not able to lead any demonstrations. We basically had just put out flyers. Dr. Weisfeld has given me a flyer to give out to people recently. But I need to be able to get to these protests and film them. That is not only, the most effective thing I can do right now, but the safest. My unit is down just between 2 people, me and my wife now. We had a lot more than that, but, there's a slander campaign going online and in real life, and I don't think that the 2 campaigns are connected. And it's been very difficult. I'm not allowed in several political circles because of outlandish rumors about me and accusations. I have noticed something, Dr. Weisfeld. I am really just like you because you deal with similar stuff. Not at the same level, and you probably can get around a lot more than me, but I'm finding myself seeing that many of the things that I had often criticized you for and berated you for, I am now dealing with myself. When lack of sleep occurs for long periods of time and everybody wants to talk to you, you tend to forget a lot of things. There was a falsehood, a rumor going around that Dr. Weisfeld is senile, which is not true. He's overworked. He works too much. But I get it. You know, he seems to stand alone. Out here, I think I'm starting to stand alone a little bit more myself, and I find that frustrating. I had 5 friends who were working with me, and we were getting somewhere. And I'm embarrassed by how, when I look at the writings that they wrote, I'm embarrassed about how much they emulated me. Now, I understand why they did, but from the way I see it, they were far superior to me, all 5 of them. Hannah, Uri, Marvin. You know, these 3 alone were better than me, but all of them, Uri, Marvin, Hannah, Miriam, and Isaiah, they were all better than me. And, you know, I was also kind of dependent on them in a way, because some of them had transportation, some of them had like connections I've never had. And I have to reevaluate how I approach these things. You know, it can be difficult to get a bus to get to some of these places I need to go. It's probably better to get a taxi, but, you know, I need fare, you know, and Dr. Weisfeld has officially been offering me money for a fare. And the only reason why it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's that unless I can guarantee I'll be able to do it, I'm not going to ask for money. And that's the thing about that worries me is I do get afraid people take advantage of Dr. Weisfeld and his, you know, and his goodwill towards people. I reach out also to Muslims who watch this. Please spread this around. We are your friends. We are your comrades. We are your brothers and sisters. I reach out to the Christians of the Orient and even to Roman Catholic dissidents who don't trust the Vatican and feel like it holds back the religion from practicing its true values in favor of, you know, capitalism or possibly crusades, whatever the current struggles are these days. This channel needs to be spread around. For the communists who watch this, we don't always get along, but if you are trying to confront Zionism and you're being falsely accused of anti-Semitism, this channel is an asset for you as well. So I'm going to bring this now to another Here and Now episode from Dr. Weisfeld's channel. This time he's talking exclusively to Ahmed of Palestine. This came out on November 18th, 2023.
Here and now, here we are. The war continues, and so do we. Well, I found an article that was very revealing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can show this to you right away.
Okay.
Here. This is from the Electronic Intifada.
Yes.
Israel admits to burning hundreds of people on the 7th of October. Yeah, the Regev, you know, who was doing
Yeah.
You know, like he just casually, you know, like just throws out, oh, yeah, well, we reduced the number of total Israeli casualties on October the 7th from 1,400 to 1,200. 200 difference. Big difference. What's the difference? Well,
he admitted it. He admitted it was those Hamas fighters. So the question is, who killed them and burned them alive like this?
Oh, it's Hamas. Hamas's fault. You know, it's Hamas murdered them. You know, yeah.
So it's Hamas. They burned themselves among with the rest of the settlers who were also burned.
Yeah.
How convenient. How convenient 400 or 500 Israeli burned.
Yeah.
Okay, 500 people, I'm sorry, burned. Then decided, oh no, there's only 300 of them were Israelis. The other were Hamas fighters.
Yes.
How that come? How that come to be?
Yeah, yeah. Let's do
It's very,
some accounting here. Okay, so it started off at 1,400. Now it's less 200 because that's
yes,
just Palestinians supposedly. Okay, so
yeah,
now we're down to 1,200. But like I read that of those, 300 were soldiers, Israeli soldiers. Okay.
yes. No, actually, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, so they say 1,400, civilians. They always say civilians, civilians. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're down
There's
to 900. 900. Okay. Now, of the 900 civilians who died, how many were killed by Israel and how many were killed by Hamas? Now,
let's just not to forget that they were mowing. They're mowing those people who were fleeing the rave party by helicopters. Those were not burnt. They were being killed by helicopter submachine guns.
Yes,
There was
targeted,
about
by
300
Hellfire missiles. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not those ones. There was being mowed by machine guns. So it's about 300.
Machine gun fire as well.
Yeah. So there's another. So it's the 600. There's others being destroyed, killed by tanks and hellfires in their homes along the captors.
Okay, not so fast, not so fast. We don't want to confuse people. Okay.
Yeah.
At the rave party, they said there was 263 burnt bodies. Okay, so obviously I saw the videos myself, like that the Israeli military released showing how they targeted cars and people, running away and all this sort of thing, Okay, so 263 for sure were killed by helicopters, so. Okay, now we're down to 637. Okay.
Yes.
Now, in the kibbutzim,
wait. They admitted that over 300 soldiers were killed on October 7th, the Israelis.
Yes.
So you have to add those.
I deducted them already. That was the first deduction from the 1,200.
No, those being burnt.
But 300 soldiers, of the 1,200, 300 were soldiers who were killed. Okay. So that's, okay, so now we're down to 637, but we don't know of the 637, how many were hostages who were killed by the Zionist military as well. So,
yes,
tank. Yeah, tank fire, helicopter fire, because, we know the strategic objective of Hamas fighters was to go in there and take hostages. They can get the release of the Palestinian hostages that were being held by Israel in its prisons, right? Okay. But there was other people who came across the border who were either, curious or who came to loot or who came to kill. Like this one guy, whose voice was taped, that the Israel ambassador broadcast at the United Nations, this one young guy, was very proud of killing 10 Israelis. Whatever, maybe it wasn't even him, who killed them, but a lot of the squatters or settlers, in the kibbutzim around, Gaza, had guns and they were soldiers, reserve army soldiers, and they were, shooting at the Hamas fighters. So, they got killed, and some Hamas fighters got killed, because of their fire. So, it's indeterminate, like of the 637, how many of them were killed by Hamas fighters in exchanges, how many were killed by individuals, who are not Hamas fighters who came over, to seek revenge. They, were killed, because of the tank fire. So it's very difficult, like 637, okay, let's say 50-50, so now we're down to about 300 Israeli civilians.
Yeah, and you have to realize that many who were killed in the kibbutzim, they were also soldiers or in their homes.
Yeah.
They've been killed. They've been targeted by Hamas fighters, and rightly so, even if they're not holding guns.
Yeah, it's war. You know,
it's war. This is not. This is part of war that Israel been waging on the Palestinians since 1947. Actually, before that, way before that. But let's start from 1947-48 war, ethnic cleansing war,
yeah.
ongoing. Israel had murdered and killed intentionally tens of thousands of Palestinians, many of them women, children, elderly, in their own homes, doing nothing, just walking and kill them, or walking, or doing, cultivating their olive groves, etc. So this is part of fighting.
Yeah, and the fact that the state of Israel can kill its own citizens, and what does President Biden have to say about that, really? All right, let's continue.
This is part of war. That's what Hamas did on October 7th. I'm not here to condone or to condemn. I'm just trying to explain to the people that what Israel trying to portray, the image of poor, helpless civilians being killed in their own homes. That's not true. Many of them were soldiers, many being murdered by the Israelis themselves, and many of the age of fighters. And we know Israel is an army, has a state. It's not the other way around. So everybody knows that an Israeli adult is a soldier, and he's a reserve soldier for the rest of his life at the age of 50, I think, 55, something like that.
45,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, so there's no apologies to be made, and there's no condemnation whatsoever. If the Israelis were not the occupation force, none of that would happen. None of that would happen. So stop crying the crocodile tears, Israelis.
Yeah. And before the Zionists were attacking the Palestinians, it was the British who were attacking the Palestinians.
The fact that the state of Israel has that policy where everybody born in the state of Israel, except with a few exceptions of that they make, everybody born within the state of Israel has to serve in the military, goes contrary to Jewish values. In Judaism, the concept of joining up for a war is absolutely obscene. Now, war is nothing foreign per se to the Jewish nation, but the Jewish nation, not just because it's a diaspora nation, but even when we were the custodians of the Holy Land, even when that was the case, we were not warmongers. We were not for war. So the very nature of how the Zionist state works is in total contradiction to Jewish values, completely. Now, I definitely, I definitely relate to Ahmed on his position of crocodile tears, because, like, I don't really feel fazed by the Hebrews and their outcry in comparison to the Palestinians, because it's the Hebrews who are the settlers and it's the Palestinians who are indigenous. And this is a systematic genocide against them, a full-blown Holocaust that has occurred here. And, it's been some... I'm not sure if we're still even on the pause, I do try my best to keep up, but, like, all of this, so much is happening at once. There is this situation sometimes when, passerbys and conversations are brought up. I find myself having to, explain that, that they have been firing on their own citizens, right? And, you know, people often will not know what I'm talking about. Now, there's a great social political awakening about these situations. So a lot of times people do know what I'm talking about when I'm having these conversations, often with total strangers. But, you know, like, I think it's also frustrating for me that, you know, a lot of times, in fact, in most cases, when I'm trying to explain the real situation, I find myself in Ahmed's situation where, I can relate, where, I'm not trying to condone or condemn. Because here's the thing, like, do I endorse what Hamas did on October 7th? Not necessarily, but I'm not going to condemn desperation. And yes, I would have to say, I'll be open about this, I would say that was technically an act of terrorism. But anybody who's viewed this channel knows that, I pushed very hard for a proper definition of terrorism, and 1 or 2 acts of terrorism doesn't make you terrorist. Terrorism is the terror tactic, and to be a terrorist, you have to specialize in terrorism. I don't really see Hamas as a terrorist organization. The action recently taken may have been terrorist, but they themselves are not a terrorist organization. Do you know that Hamas actually does a lot of humanitarian work for the people in Gaza? They're not just constantly like, how are we going to get at the Israelis? A lot of times their situation is, how are we going to make sure that the people in Gaza have enough food to eat, have proper water, and plumbing, and housing? That's often the concern of Hamas. While I'm not the best fan of Hamas, I am not the enemy of Hamas. And Hamas is not the problem here. Hamas was a response by the people in Gaza who felt that the PLO was too weak and soft on the problem with Israel. There's an entire wall around Gaza. It's known as the biggest open-air prison. It's twice the size of the Berlin Wall, twice the size of the Berlin Wall. This is just. Okay, I'm ranting again. I'm going to continue, but like Ahmed, I love Ahmed. I mean, for the few times I have spoken to him, I think at least twice, but I know I spoke to him once. I love this dude. This dude is like amazing. He has a very, very sharp memory. I hope to see him more on the Here and Now with Dr. Weisfeld.
Are you there?
Yeah, the image was frozen there. Yeah, we had a...
Yeah, no worries. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so I was saying that even before the Zionists, the Palestinians were being attacked by the British in the British occupation.
Both British and Zionist gangs.
Yeah, British and together, yeah, as well.
Yeah, they're together. Yeah. Yeah, like, I mean, there's, like, we take the Tantura massacre, which is broadcasted on Israeli TV by the fighters themselves, or the terrorists themselves, who were proudly gloating about how they killed and massacred civilians, unarmed civilians, untrained civilians to even know how to use arms. They killed them in cold blood.
Yeah, I saw video interviews with them. One guy was so proud that they had a flamethrower and they could burn up, people without any risk to themselves. He actually was laughing while he was explaining this.
Yeah, like, even after all these years, after 75 years, no regret whatsoever to what they did. Nothing. They said, one of them, they said, it must be done to create a state. He is telling us without any doubt that we created our state by terror, by using terror against the people of Palestine. Go ahead.
I've seen a few, interviews with those participants who regretted their participation, but they were the lesser number, of course. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. And this idea of the state, is incredible. Like this concept of the state, the nation state, which comes from Europe. It's not even part of Judaism, like it's Protestantism that was first, it blew up, in the Reformation, when all the states in Europe wanted to be independent. And this is, how they conceived independence as a nation state for their own nation. And they defined their nationalism in their one sort of cultural and homogeneous identity. And, everybody else had to conform and assimilate, otherwise they would be killed.
Yes, yes. Okay. Now I can really dig into something here. Thank you, AB Man. All right. So I'm going to give you some history around this. According to Muslim tradition, only a conqueror could enter through the Jaffa Gate on horseback. Now, this is actually why there's a hole, not really a hole, like it's a slot. It's a large slot that is, was made, because the Kaiser, okay, had an alliance with the pan-Turkic ultra-nationalist fascists, which is not the same as the Ottomans. Now, regardless of what your opinion is about the Ottomans, there's a serious regime change when it comes to Ataturk. And I could get into that into another point. But I do want to make this distinction that the Kaiser did not come as a conqueror. That's why he didn't ride on horseback into the Jaffa Gate as he thought he was going to. And he didn't want to come off that way because he came as a visiting dignitary. So they built a slot. They cut a slot at the walls somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where, but there is that slot there. And that's also where traffic often comes into the old city. And that was done for the Kaiser coming as a visiting dignitary. Now, this is not the same thing as what happened with Sir Edmund Allenby. Now, which is really the point, which is really the thing I'm going to get into here. This is what I hate about the British. They often are seen that, oh, well, theirs is a noble imperialism. Theirs is a noble empire. Their colonialism is, the best because it's actually noble, except that actually it's some of the worst. You know that British colonialism is the only form of colonialism that actually matches the cross-Asian colonialism that the Asians did to each other, before European interference. Only the British have ever matched them. Yes, if you get into the history of Korea and the history of China and the history of Japan, it's ancient history. It's all, a lot of it's a lot of colonial back and forth, conquests on each other, which actually in many ways had outmatched the way that the Europeans did colonial projects upon themselves. Of course, I would say that ultimately, in hindsight, or in the long-term effects, I would say that actually the European colonialists upon themselves, the different European colonial countries attempting to colonize each other, was worse because it resulted in whiteness, and that's before the British settler colonial projects. However, the violence and the mayhem of the British settler colonial projects are actually what actually I would say is the one thing that matches the way the Asians colonized each other. And I'm not talking about all Asians. I'm talking largely about China and Japan and Korea and that sort of thing. Now, the point here is that when the British conquered Palestine and took it from the Turkish, Sir Edmund Allenby, true to the tradition, came through the Jaffa Gate. But this is part of that progressive spin that they always put on themselves. He did not come on horseback. He walked through the Jaffa Gate. And do you know what he said? He said, "This is the last crusade." Don't believe me? Ask Dr. Weisfeld. And if you don't believe Dr. Weisfeld, then you are an idiot or you're in some kind of denial. Because AB Man, really is kind of an expert on that history. I mean, I've learned a lot about Jerusalem, so one thing that I found, through my years of studying Jerusalem and my fascination of the old city, Dr. Weisfeld has been very sharp about its history. Sir Edmund Allenby, I learned this from Dr. Weisfeld, and I don't remember where, but I actually had read an article which corresponded to what he said. I already believe Dr. Weisfeld, because there's no reason for me not to believe him. He's very objective and honest about these things. But Sir Edmund Allenby, when he came in here, he said, "This is the last crusade." That is a fact. And this has much to do with what this 4-part series represents. Zionism is a continuation of the Crusades. So, one of the things that, just can't be, missed is how much the British are indicted in this whole problem. Just as the British are indicted with the crime of Americanism, they are also indicted with the crime of Zionism.
And even after they assimilated, they got killed anyway, you know, like the Jewish people and the Roma people. So it's the nation state concept that comes from Europe. Originally, you know, by the German, the Prussian, you know, political theorist, you know, Hegel, who presented the idea, you know, as a form of democratic nationalism, you know, that the nation, you know, would govern itself. And then they would define the nation according to the church. And they called it democracy. You know, this is, you know, how democracy started, you know, as a perverted form of nationalism.
Yes. Yeah. Let's go back to the Zionist terror campaign. I call it Zionist terror campaign of genocide. It's not a war. This is not a war. A war, usually you have two armies facing each other in a symmetrical war. But this is an asymmetrical attack on civilians by the Zionists, whereas there's some form of resistance by the Palestinians in form of different militia groups like Hamas, Jihad, Popular Front, and others. So, so far as of this morning, the death toll is over 12,000, over 30,000 injured. Almost half of the Gaza Strip infrastructure, homes, etc., is being reduced to rubble. So
that's only the known deaths.
Exactly.
That's the minimum. Then there's the deaths that have not been found underneath the rubble yet.
Definitely, there's a few thousand more still under the rubble. That's very sad. While the world is watching what's going on and just giving us lip service. Like I never heard in my life, you know, when there's such, let's call it a war. Okay, I never heard anybody calling for pause of war. Like pause, like all the Western leaders, instead, before they we are for Israel, go ahead, kill and maim and injure and destroy, we're behind you under the banner of Israel has a right to defend itself. Whereas that when the pressure is mounting within these countries, now they are using public relation lip service to their people. Oh, we call on Israel to exert maximum restraint from hurting women and children, civilians. And we call on Israel to pause for a humanitarian corridor. Of course, this has been happening for a week now. Nothing happened. Just yesterday, like within the past 24 hours, one of the highest toll being murdered by the Israelis of about 1,000 Palestinians within 24 hours.
You know, I've now said more than once for the Bundist movement that restructuring Europe and the need for Europeans to pay reparations for all that has been done in the name of whiteness should be over. You know, the only Europeans you could trust to oversee this would be the Irish and the Jewish Europeans. But perhaps I should have added the Romani as well. You know, the Romani, like the Jewish people, are also a diaspora nation. I mean, there's kind of a difference, though, because like the Jewish nation is based on culture and religion, and the Romani nation is based on ethnicity and culture. But they're both diaspora nations, so perhaps I should say that, you know, the Romani should be part of that as well. We can only hope that that's how these things would occur. As far as this conversation from the here and now, this is it for this video. This has been Anti-Crusade, part 3 of 4. When we get to the final one, Anti-Crusade, part 4 of 4, this conversation will be finished. In other words, we're going to go through the rest of this conversation in the next video. I now leave you with the finale of this video, the third documentary from Al Jazeera on the Crusades, which took place, which was published on December 21st, 2016.
In the history of conflict between East and West, the mightiest battle between Christianity and Islam, a holy war in the name of religion. For the first time, the story of the Crusades from an Arab perspective. The beginning of the 11th century. A dramatic Muslim revival is building under the command of Salah ad-Din, known in the West as Saladin.
بينما كان صلاح الدين يوطد أركان دولته في مصر، كان يحتاج إلى حليف قوي، ولم يكن هناك حليف أقوى من القدر يصاحب صلاح الدين في هذه الفترة.
Fate which brought a great Muslim victory in the Battle of Hattin.
This is the great military victory that will open the way to recapturing Jerusalem itself.
And Salah ad-Din's famous struggle for the holy city of Jerusalem with Richard the Lionheart.
عاوز يرجع وقد حقق انتصارا من نوع ما، فشل في تحقيق هذا الانتصار في ميدان الحرب، فتصور أنه يمكنه أن يحققه في ميدان الدبلوماسية والسياسة.
In the third episode of this series, the story of the unification of the Muslim front against the Crusades. The year 1164. The Eastern Mediterranean. Almost 7 decades have passed since the first Crusaders arrived in the region. Their initial success had been crowned with the fall of the holy city of Jerusalem.
كان نجاح الحملة الصليبية الأولى في اقتحام مدينة بيت المقدس والاستيلاء عليها أمراً يفوق الحلم الذي حركهم من الغرب الأوروبي، ولكنه كان عقاباً للمسلمين والعرب على فرقتهم وتقاتلهم فيما بينهم.
But within half a century, the Zengids, a Turkic dynasty ruling the northern Levant, took command of the Muslim revival and managed to recapture Edessa, the first Crusader county to be founded in the east.
It's the first big defeat for the Crusaders, and it shows that they can actually be defeated and that the Muslim revival can begin to gather some pace.
And now, the two powers each set out to conquer the same great prize, Egypt. The troops of both Nur ad-Din Zengi and Amalric I, the Crusader king of Jerusalem, fought for control of the Nile Valley.
في غمرة هذا الصراع برز يوسف المشهور باسم صلاح الدين الأيوبي، شاباً فوق 20 بقليل، وصاحب عمه أسد الدين شركوه في أول جيش يرسله نور الدين محمود إلى مصر.
After 5 years of struggle, Nur ad-Din's Kurdish general Shirkuh managed to expel the Crusaders from Egypt
وحسم الصراع والسباق الزمني بين نور الدين محمود والملك الصليبي عموري، وانتهى الأمر بسيطرة أسد الدين شيراكو في الوزارة للعاضد الفاطمي آخر الخلفاء الفاطميين، ثم بعد هذا تولى الأمر صلاح الدين الأيوبي.
Within 2 years of succeeding his uncle Shirkuh as vizier, Salah ad-Din made a momentous move, bringing an end to 2.5 centuries of the Fatimid Shia Caliphate. He declared Egypt's loyalty to the Sunni Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad, making it an integral part of the Zingid state. A state now large and strong enough to carry out Nur ad-Din's grand plan to expel the Crusaders.
الشمصر منطق تاريخي رائع. كل من دخل دائرة الجهاد الإسلامي كان من خلال هذا الرحم الجغرافي التاريخي الشمصر. نور الدين محمود مدرك هذه الرابطة.
With Nur ad-Din now in control of Egypt, the dream of reconquering Jerusalem seemed very close. But the mission of liberating the Holy City was soon to pass to his Kurdish deputy in Egypt, Salah ad-Din.
في هذه الفترة بالذات كان سيده نور الدين محمود قد انتقل إلى جوار ربه. المشكلة الأساسية هي وراثة نور الدين محمود. بدأ الأمراء الزنكيين في الموصل وحلب ودمشق وغيرها من المناطق في التنازع حول إرث نور الدين محمود.
نور الدين محمود ترك ابنه الصالح إسماعيل وهو صبي صغير لا يصلح للسياسة، وبدأت دمشق تعود إلى سيرتها في الصراعات السياسية والتحالفات المضادة.
The news was carried to Salah ad-Din in Cairo. He fell into deep mourning for the death of the great warrior king. But what saddened him even more was the Zingid infighting over Nur ad-Din's heritage and their neglect of his mission to liberate Jerusalem. Salah ad-Din became determined to realize his master's dream.
إنما هو كان مهم بالنسبة له إقرار وتوطيد الجبهة الإسلامية لسبب بسيط قوي، أن بعض خلفاء نور الدين محمود لم يكن يتورع عن إنه يتحالف مع الصليبيين ضد صلاح الدين وضد الجبهة الإسلامية التي يحاول صلاح الدين أن يبنيها.
Salah ad-Din set out from Egypt, heading for the Levant. He would bring the Zingids under his command by force of arms.
صلاح الدين لا شك أنه كان الوريث الشرعي لمشروع نور الدين، وجاء إلى الشام تحديداً. يعني كان يمكن أن لا يأتي إلى الشام، وإنما قدم إليها واتخذها عاصمته لأنه كان يريد المضي في مشروع نور الدين التحريري.
In 1174, both Nur al-Din and the king of Jerusalem died. While for the Christians, the death of Amalric I, a very powerful, military, important king, meant that the throne went to Baldwin IV.
With a mere boy suffering from leprosy, now on the throne of Jerusalem, a struggle broke out among the nobility over who should be the regent. Guy of Lusignan or Reynold of Châtillon. But it was Raymond III, Count of Tripoli, who took the prize. He quickly signed a truce with Salah ad-Din.
صلاح الدين أدرك أن الوقت لم يحن بعد لقتال الصليبيين، فعقد هدنة مع ريمون كونت طرابلس مدتها 10 سنوات و10 أشهر و10 أيام كما جرت العادة على السلام، وبدأ يرتب البيت من الداخل. ترتيب البيت من الداخل اقتضى بسبب الظروف السياسية يعني المتنافرة في ذلك الحين، اقتضى إن صلاح الدين يخوض معارك ضد الأمراء الصغار المتنافرين لمدة 33 شهراً.
تفسير ذلك أن أبناء نور الدين وأخوته لم يستجيبوا للانضمام إلى جبهة صلاح الدين، وبالتالي كان عليه أن يبذل جهداً ويبذل وقتاً أيضاً من أجل استعادة حلب.
Salah ad-Din marched his army to Aleppo and laid siege to the city. The Zingids, though, refused to surrender and hatched a plan to get rid of Salah ad-Din, but not on the battlefield. They called on the Al-Hashashun, or the Assassins, a secret Shia order famed for its many political killings.
مرة كانوا بيشتغلوا ضد الصليبيين ومرة ضد المسلمين، وحاولوا اغتيال عدد كبير جدا من الناس، ويبدو ان هم يعني عارف فرقة إرهابية، بس استخدمنا المصطلحات المعاصرة للي يدفع.
One night in May 1175, the assassins infiltrated Salah ad-Din's camp around Aleppo and reached his tent.
التركيز كان على قتل زعماء السنة وزعماء الحركة الجهاد أو الزعماء البارزين آنذاك. فهل هؤلاء كانوا ضد أن يسود ويحرك العالم الإسلامي قيادة سنية، أم أنهم كانوا محالفين للصليبيين؟
For another 8 years, Salah ad-Din would continue his efforts to reunite the territories of the Levant and Mesopotamia under his command. And when Aleppo finally surrendered, Salah ad-Din became the mightiest ruler of the Muslim world, the Sultan of the Ayyubid state, a dynasty that would rule for another 7 decades.
صلاح الدين أصبح تحت يده نهر النيل بإمكاناته الضخمة البشرية ونهر العاصي، ولا ننسى نهر الفرات ودجلة والمنطقة الجزيرة الفراتية اللي في شمال العراق التي كانت مخزونا بشريا ضخما.
And for me, that's Saladin's great achievement, is persuading the group of people to work with him. And once he's got those resources, then he can fight the Crusaders effectively and really try to recover Jerusalem.
وصارت كلمة الجهاد والقدس كلمتان يرددهم جميع المسلمين، والدعاة في دمشق والقاهرة وحلب والموصل وكل الحواضر الإسلامية يعدون الأمة ليوم عظيم.
As the Muslim front was uniting, the leprous king of Jerusalem, Baldwin IV, faced problems controlling his vassals, who were endangering his truce with Salah ad-Din.
ونكبت المملكة بأمراء أطراف قوي نفوذهم مثل رينو دي شاتون في الكرك.
رينو دي شاتيون كان يسيطر على الكرك، والكرك هي يعني قلعة منيعة وتقع على طريق الحج، ومن هنا أراد أن يستفيد من هذا الموقع لإعاقة المسلمين واستفزازهم.
Renaud allied with the Knights Templar, the most powerful and extreme of the Crusaders' military orders. Their goal was to lay waste to Islam's most sacred sites.
أرناط قام بعملية غريبة جدا. قرر إنه يروح يهدم الكعبة وينبش قبر الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام في الحجاز. وبالفعل نزل مجموعة من الفرسان الصليبيين، وقبل ما يوصلوا لمكة استطاعت القوات المصرية أنها تقبض عليهم وتجيبهم وتغرق الأسطول اللي هو كان نقلهم، وعادوا بيهم إلى السلطان العادل الأيوبي اللي هو أخو صلاح الدين، والذي كان نائبه في القاهرة حين وقعت هذه الواقعة، وكان صلاح الدين في الشام في الوقت ده. العادل كان عاوز يسيبهم يطلق سراحهم، صلاح الدين أصر أن يتم إعدامهم. العادل توسط له بأنه دول ناس إحنا أمناهم، قال له لا، دول عرفوا الطريق وإنه لازم يبقى فيه رادع عشان الحكاية ما تتكررش، وقتلهم جميعا.
نجح صلاح الدين أن يحبط هذه المحاولة، وكان ده بالنسبة للمسلمين عمل ضخم ديني كبير قوي، أن كيف يعتدي هذا الرجل على الأراضي المقدسة ولا يجد من ينجدها، لكن بنجد صلاح الدين كل يوم اسمه بيعلم.
توفي الملك المجذوم يعني الذي كان مصابا بالبرص، وانتقلت السلطة إلى أخته. أخته تزوجت أحد النبلاء الفرنسيين جي دو لوزينيون الذي أصبح ملكا. جي دو لوزينيون كان طائشا وخفيفا على ما يبدو كملك.
The new king could not control his vassal nobles, who finally succeeded in destroying the kingdom's truce with Salah ad-Din.
ارتكب أرناط جريمة أخرى في انتهاك صريح للمعاهدة. كان في قافلة تجارية كبيرة جدا، هو قيل إن كان فيها أخت صلاح الدين، إنما ما كانش حقيقة، ما كانش الكلام ده حاصل يعني. نهبوا طبعا أموال القافلة كلها، ذبحوا الناس اللي فيها، أخذوا منها سبايا وأسرى، وأرناط يعني تصرف بالصفاقة والوحشية اللازمة.
حين ذاك يعني ارتفعت وتيرة الغضب لدى صلاح الدين، وأقسم أنه إذا ظفر به سيقتله.
صلاح الدين جات له الحجة لتنفيذ مشروعه اللي عاش من أجله على طبق من فضة.
وشعر صلاح الدين أنه أصبح لديه القوات الكافية والظروف الكافية والمناخ العسكري المناسب والظروف المواتية عند الصليبيين. قال في الحالة دي ممكن أن نبدأ الحرب.
Messengers galloped to every corner of the state with mobilizing orders. And in Damascus, Salah ad-Din and his commanders drew up the final plans of the assault. As soon as the army was assembled, it crossed the River Jordan into the heart of the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
صلاح الدين فرض المعركة عليهم مكانا وزمانا. فإذا تمكن صلاح الدين من نقل الصراع إلى قلب فلسطين كان مقتل الصليبيين، وبالتالي قام بحصار قلعة طبرية. طبعاً لا يفهم من هذا أن العملية كانت سهلة على الإطلاق، لأن المملكة بيت المقدس حشدت أكبر جيش تمكن الصليبيون من حشده منذ أن قدموا إلى المنطقة سنة 1098. وتجمع الصليبيون في عين صفورية، وهو مكان في غاية الأهمية نظراً لتوافر المياه فيه.
وعقدوا مجلس حرب وتم التداول، نعمل ايه؟
وبدأ السؤال يطرح على الصليبين: نذهب إليه أم يأتي إلينا؟
الفارق بين صلاح الدين والصليبيين أن صلاح الدين كان هو صاحب القرار، هو واضع الخطة، بينما الصليبيون كانوا عدة رؤوس والملك ضعيف، وكل شخص يريد أن ينفذ الخطة التي يريد.
كانت الخطة بتاعت صلاح الدين استدراج الصليبيين للخروج في معركة، وكان هناك رأي في أوساط الصليبيين بيقول ريمون دي سانجيل بأنه خلي صلاح الدين يجي لنا، وهو عارف أنه احتمالات النصر لو راح لهم في هذا المكان قليلة، وعارف أنه لو خرجهم من صفورية إلى أي مكان آخر في معركة مفتوحة هيقضي عليهم. انتصر الرأي القائل بالخروج، ومع ضوء الصباح الأول واصلوا النفير العام والاستعداد للمسير والخروج لملاقاة صلاح الدين الأيوبي.
فكرة قاتلة أدت بكارثة على المملكة الصليبية، لأن كان معنى هذا قطع طريق حوالي 20 كيلو، كذلك هناك حر الشمس يوليو في الصيف، ولا تتوافر المياه لديهم، ولم يؤمنوا خطوط تموين لهم.
In his camp around Tiberias, Salah ad-Din was waiting for the Crusaders' next move. And when the news arrived, he sensed victory. The Crusaders had walked into the trap Salah ad-Din had set for them. A move that would cost them the biggest ever defeat in the history of the Crusades. July 1187. Crusader armies under the command of Guy of Lusignan, the King of Jerusalem, are marching towards a decisive battle with the Muslim army under Salah ad-Din. The Sultan had set a trap for the Crusaders, and they were carelessly walking into it. Under the hot July sun. When the thirsty army finally camped at Hattin, Salah ad-Din had already blocked the way to the only water source.
عسكر الجيش الإسلامي فيما بين الجيش الصليبي والماء، ما بحيرة طبرية، وفي قرون حطين عسكر الجيش الصليبي وأمضى ليلة سوداء. بعض المتسللين المسلمين أشعلوا النار في هذه الأعشاب المحيطة بمعسكر الصليبيين.
وهنا يجب أن نلفت إلى أمر مهم، أن الفارس الصليبي كان يلبس دروع حديد وثياب حديدية، ووهج النار سيؤذي هذا الفارس.
فضلا عن المناوشات والرمي بالأسهم وإشعال النيران في الخيام، يعني خلوهم أمضوا ليلة هبال. لما صبح الصباح كان الإرهاق قد تمكن منهم والعطش، والمسلمون يحولون بينهم وبين بحيرة طبرين.
يا جند الإسلام، لقد ابتليت دورنا منذ 90 عاماً بقوم هجروا أوطانهم واستباحوا أرضنا وعرضنا باسم المسيح، والمسيح منهم براء. ليكن لكم في قسوتهم عبرة، ولا تأخذنكم بهم رأفة ولا رحمة. اجعلوا يومكم يوم حصاد، ولنجتز جذورهم من فوق أرضنا. الله أكبر! الله أكبر! الله أكبر! الله أكبر!
والتقى الطرفان في معركة حاسمة تعتبر أخطر معركة في تاريخ الصليبيين.
By the end of the Battle of Hattin, the vast majority of Crusader forces had been either captured or killed. The list of prisoners included King Guy of Jerusalem and the cream of Christian nobility, principal among whom was Reynold of Châtillon. Salah ad-Din fulfilled his oath to kill Reynold.
He smashes the Frankish army. He captures the King of Jerusalem. He seizes the true cross. And this is the great military victory that will open the way to recapturing Jerusalem itself.
That night, Salah ad-Din and his commanders celebrated their victory and began laying plans for their next move.
صلاح الدين كان يرى ضرورة فتح الساحل الشامي قبل فتح بيت المقدس، وهذا هو التفكير المنطقي، لأن فتح الساحل معناه أن بيت المقدس ستقع في قبضته حتماً، ولهذا فقد أنفذ السرايا لإسقاط هذه المدن الساحلية.
Within 2 months of victory at Hattin, Salah ad-Din's forces had liberated most of the Levantine coast. And now, he turned his army towards the biggest prize of all, Jerusalem.
الذي كان يتولى الدفاع عن القدس ديباليان، أحد النبلاء الصليبيين، وعملوا طقوس غريبة جدا. جابوا بنات النبلاء وحلقوا شعورهن تماما، وعملوا طقوس غريبة في التضرع والتوسل عشان يتقوا شر الهجوم اللي بيقوده صلاح الدين. صلاح الدين كان مصرا على إنه يقتحم القدس وإنه ياخدها بالسيف لكي ينتقم لما جرى لأهلها منذ 88 عاماً.
after a 10-day assault on the city. Balian of Ibelin came out to meet Salah ad-Din to offer unconditional surrender. On the 2nd of October 1187, the Muslims entered Jerusalem.
المشهد يناقض تماما مشهد المجزرة البشعة التي جرت في يوليو 1099. سمح للصليبيين ان هم يخرجوا، وخرج يعني عائلات النبلاء وغيره في موكب سلمي لم يتعرض لهم احد من المسلمين.
فرض ما يمكن ان نسميه فدية او ضريبة خروج او شيء رمزي دلالة على التسليم والوضع الذي آلت إليه القوات الصليبية داخل بيت المقدس.
الأغنياء من أمراء الصليبيين رفضوا أن يدفعوا الفدية لهؤلاء الفقراء، دفعوا نفسهم.
بنجد هنا أن هرقل بطريرك بيت المقدس جمع كل ماله اللي موجود في الكنيسة وكل المدخرات وخرج بها محملة على أكثر من دبة دون أن يقدم درهما واحدا يكون فدية أو جزية لأسير موجود داخل المدينة.
وهنا شهم صلاح الدين، سدد من ماله الخاص عن الذين لم يتمكنوا من دفع ما يتوجب عليهم لقاء خروجهم من القدس، وهذا الأمر سجله لصلاح الدين وسيسجل إلى أبد الآبدين، حتى أعداء صلاح الدين سجلوا هذا الأمر.
من المهم أن نتأمل مسلك المنتصر، لأن كثيراً من القادة في التاريخ نشوة الانتصار تعميهم عن رؤية الحقائق، فيتجهوا إلى سفك الدماء والانتقام بوحشية. إلا هذا الرجل.
Saladin is famous throughout history for his generosity, his justice, and his ability to inspire his people. This has earned him respect on the Christian side and the Muslim side, and there's many stories to illustrate this. There's one story when a Frankish woman has had her baby taken and kidnapped, and it's taken to the Muslim markets and sold. And she's obviously devastated by this. And some of her friends say, well, go to see Saladin. I'm sure he'll help you.
تقول الروايات غربية مش شرقية، أمسك بيد المرأة وطاف بها شرقاً وغرباً وشمالاً وجنوباً، ولم يهدأ له بال حتى عثر على الطفل الفقيد، فحضنته أمه وركعت عند قدميه تقول: يا سلطان يا عظيم، ليت ملوكنا في الغرب يكونون مثلك في هذا النبل.
Salah ad-Din, the Kurdish officer, now the greatest Muslim sultan, had liberated Jerusalem after 88 years of Crusader occupation. Fulfilling a dream he inherited from his master, Nur ad-Din Zingi. and as the Muslim places of worship were restored, the pulpit that Nur ad-Din had ordered built 2 decades earlier was finally carried into Al-Aqsa Mosque.
وقام محي الدين بن زكي الخطيب الدمشقي المهم بإلقاء خطبة مناسبة في هذه المناسبة الجليلة.
The fall of Jerusalem to Saladin in 1187 caused a seismic shock in Western Europe. The Pope is said to have died when he heard the news. This is something that rouses Christendom in a way that's not happened before.
The sources seem to imply a sort of collective nervous breakdown because Jerusalem, they thought, had been given back to Christian rule providentially as part of God's purpose and scheme. So they questioned if God can allow this to happen.
However, newly liberated Jerusalem was not to be Salah ad-Din's final target. In November 1187, he commanded his army to march towards Tyre and put it under siege. But for 2 months, the heavily fortified city held out.
كان قد دخل الشتاء والجيش الأيوبي مجهد والاستمرار في حصارها لإسقاطها أمر عبثي، فلا بد من السيطرة على مناطق أخرى، فليست القضية قضية سور.
وهذا خطأ كان كبير من صلاح الدين، إذ أن بقايا الصليبيين في المنطقة تجمعوا كلهم في صور لتظهر فيما بعد هذه المدينة كمقاومة وكأساس لرد الصليبيين بعد حطين.
صور كانت الميناء الوحيد الباقي في أيدي الصليبيين، وبدأ الضغط من صور على عكا، وفرضوا حصار استمر أكثر من عامين على عكا.
في هذا التوقيت كان قد بدأ الغرب الأوروبي يتحرك لاستغاثة الصليبيين في الشرق.
دعاة البابوية كانوا يجوبون الأسواق وأماكن التجمعات، ومعهم صورة رسم فيها فارس مسلم على حصان يبول على كنيسة القيامة، وده عشان يستفز مشاعر الناس للدفاع عن هذه المقدسات. صلاح الدين عمل ربكة في العقلية الأوروبية.
ومن الطريف أن يقال أن صلاح الدين الأيوبي ساعد على تطوير النظام الضرائبي في أوروبا العصور الوسطى من خلال عشور صلاح الدين التي كانت تمثل جمعاً للمال من أجل تمويل حملة صليبية جديدة.
All the great kings and rulers of the West have to take the cross. They have to go to try to recover Jerusalem from the Muslims. This is what's known as the Third Crusade, arguably the greatest crusading expedition of the crusading age.
Europe mobilized its armies, and its 3 greatest monarchs set off towards the east. Frederick I, the Holy Roman Emperor, known as Barbarossa. Philip II of France, known as Philip Augustus. And last but not least, Richard the Lionheart, King of England. The Emperor Barbarossa died in Asia Minor on his way to the Holy Land. But Philip Augustus and Richard the Lionheart arrived safely by sea. Their armies immediately joined the Crusaders who had been besieging Acre for 2 solid years.
الجيوش الصليبية اللي موجودة واللي جت من بره كلها بتحاصر عكا، بينما في عدد كبير جدا من الأمراء الذين كانوا يشكلون جيش صلاح الدين في معركة حطين ابتدوا ينصرفوا عائدين إلى بلادهم. وانصرافهم عائدين إلى بلادهم وعدم استجابة بعضهم لدعوة صلاح الدين للرجوع هو الذي جعل صلاح الدين عاجزاً عن فك هذا الحصار، خصوصاً إنه ده بالنسبة للصليبيين كانت معركة الحياة أو الموت، المعركة الأخيرة.
اشتد الحصار على المسلمين داخل عكا ولم يكن أمامهم إلا التسليم الذي أعلنوه في منتصف يوليو 1191.
سلموا بناء على أمان، ونكس ريتشارد الأول بعهد الأمان، فإذا به يعدم 3000 بعد ما خدوا الأمان. يعني هم دول لو كانوا قاتلوا يعني، بس التاريخ لا يعرف لو.
صلاح الدين الأيوبي بطل حطين الذي تذوق حلاوة الانتصار الآن يتجرع مرارة الهزيمة.
Philip Augustus soon returned to France, leaving Richard the Lionheart in sole command of the Third Crusade. It was the spur that rekindled his dream of glory through the recapture of the holy city of Jerusalem.
بدأ يفكر في الدخول إلى أو الاتجاه إلى بيت المقدس الذي قام صلاح الدين بتحصينه تحصينا جيدا وردم الآبار التي كانت في الطريق ما بين عكا وبيت المقدس حتى لا يستفيد منها الصليبيين، حتى إذا حاولوا التقدم إلى بيت المقدس.
هو أدرك إنه مش بوسع هذه القوات كلها إن هي تسترد الأراضي التي حررها في فلسطين والساحل الشامي، أدرك ده، إنما خاف من محاولة هجوم قد تكون ناجحة على بيت المقدس فتحصن بها.
لقالوس قلب الأسد وصلته أنباء أنه مهدد في عرشه في إنجلترا، فلذلك كان يريد بأي ثمن عقد هدنة وإنهاء وجوده والخلاص.
أيقن ريتشارد قلب الأسد أنه لن يتمكن بأي حال من الأحوال التقدم أو السيطرة على بيت المقدس، مما اضطره إلى الدخول فيما يمكن أن نسميه مفاوضات.
وكان صلاح الدين من الذكاء بحيث أنه صدر العادل أبو بكر شقيقه لكي يقوم بالتوصل إلى حل مع الصليبيين. وبعد عام كامل من المفاوضات توصل إلى ما يعرف بصلح الرملة، وهو ذروة الدبلوماسية الأيوبية.
وصلح الرملة في الحقيقة أبقى على ما هو عليه. لم يستطع ريتشارد أن يغير حقائق الموقف العسكري على الأرض. فضلت البلاد التي فتحها صلاح الدين الأيوبي في حوزته، ولم يبقى في حوزة الصليبيين غير إمارة طرابلس. أنطاكيا كانت موجودة، ما كانش يعني حصل حرب حواليها. وعكا التي نجحت القوات في استعادتها.
After more than a year in the east, Richard the Lionheart returned to Europe, but without the keys to Jerusalem. The Third Crusade had ended in failure.
صلاح الدين الأيوبي بعد رحيل ريتشارد استراح قليلا، لكن الراجل كان تمكن منه المرض.
مرض حوالي 11 يوم وتدهورت صحته بصورة لم ينفع فيها علاج الأطباء. وفي فجر يوم الأربعاء 4 مارس 1193 توفي صلاح الدين بعد رحلة مع المرض.
صلاح الدين لما مات ما لقوش في خزنته حاجة، قروش مش عارف 94 درهم.
هذا كل ما يملكه السلطان. وعندما أرادوا أن يكفنوه استلفوا أقمشة لتكفين السلطان العظيم الذي أنفق ماله وصحته على الجهاد، وبالتالي كون صورة ذهنية فريدة لا تزال تعيش بيننا.
حركة الجهاد الإسلامي بقيادة صلاح الدين نجحت في القضاء على زهرة الجيوش اللاتينية وفي استرداد بيت المقدس رمز الصراع. لكن المشكلة أن خلفاء صلاح الدين لم يكونوا على شاكلته، فمدوا في أجل الكيان الصليبي حوالي 100 سنة أخرى.
For a century to come, the struggle would continue. But a storm was gathering in the east, a threat to the Muslim world far greater than the one that had arrived from the west, and was known in history as the Crusades.